Chapter 1088. The six-winged divine king's face was gloomy. Lin Yu's growth had exceeded his expectations. He could not allow this to continue. A bronze sword appeared in the six-winged divine king's hand. There were ancient patterns on it, engraved with mountains, rivers, and all living beings. However, there were still bloodstains that would never dry on it. Those eye-catching bloodstains stirred Lin Yu's bloodline. Lin Yu's killing intent was so intense for the first time. Why? Can you feel it? The six-winged divine king smiled. Back then, I used this sword to injure the old divine king. The blood of a divine king had been refined by the six-winged divine king for many years. It had now become a part of the divine sword. Abandon everything. What is it that you seek? Lin Yu spoke again. The emperor's sword in his hand seemed to interweave 3,000 worlds, enough to destroy everything. Supreme status, power that surpasses everything. The six-winged divine king only replied. At this point, the six-winged divine king no longer held back. The aura on his body became even stronger. It almost surpassed the peak of the sage realm. The aura of a divine king vaguely appeared on his body. The divine king realm was above everything. Even a trace of it was enough to shake heaven and earth. The six-winged divine king spoke slowly. It's time to end this. As he took a step forward, the void was destroyed inch by inch. Although the great Solar Buddha was at the half-step divine king realm, it was not his original body that attacked. Lin Yu only grasped 80% of his strength. Now, he was obviously at a disadvantage against the six-winged divine king. Some kind of origin source substance in heaven and earth was gathering toward the six-winged divine king. This was what the six-winged divine king relied on to break through to the divine king realm. Lin Yu watched and did not stop it. This was the purpose of his trip. However, there was another purpose: to save Heavenly Phoenix. In the east of the city of divine kings, where Heavenly Phoenix was imprisoned, a sage realm aura suddenly erupted. Outside Heavenly Phoenix's prison, Lin Yu's aura appeared. Although it wasn't blazing, it definitely had the aura of a sage. This was a part of the power that Lin Yu, Archaeosaurus, and the others had divided. It was Lin Yu's clone. He had already refined it when he was still in the Forgotten Immortal sect. However, due to a series of reasons, it was neglected. However, in the past few months, Lin Yu had collected a large amount of materials and strengthened it. Now, as Lin Yu's strength increased, This puppet also possessed the ability to bear the power of a saint. However, it was clear that the power of this puppet was very mottled. It could only barely reach the saint realm. But this was enough. The current saint realm powers were all restricted by the darkness god priest and the others, and it was difficult for them to come over. At this moment, the puppet Lin Yu seemed to have entered an uninhabited realm. The 5 Emperor Realm cultivators hidden in the Qingyun domain formed a formation to stop the puppet Lin Yu. However, with the support of the Saint Realm power, as long as the other saints in the 3 realms and 5 domains didn't appear, no power could stop it. There were screams. The 5 Emperor Realm cultivators were smashed to pieces by the puppet Lin Yu, along with the formation. Their bodies and souls were destroyed. The Darkness God Priest and the others who were fighting with the hidden saints of the Qingyun domain felt the fluctuations in the east of the Qingyun domain and smiled. Their purpose this time was only to make the prophecy before the storm. Most importantly, they wanted to know the strength of the Qingyun domain. Most importantly, they wanted to take the Yuqing goddess away. Secondly, they wanted to save Heavenly Phoenix. These two things went hand in hand. Now, the Darkness God Priest and the others roughly knew that even if there were saints in the Qingyun domain who hadn't appeared, there were only 3 saints in the 6-winged Divine King's forces. The Darkness God Priest was familiar with these 3 saints. Not long ago, he had been captured by these 3 saints together. The Darkness God Priest faced an old ghost who seemed to have crawled out of hell. Behind him, the yellow springs floated up and down. They were all in outer space. This was because the shock waves of a battle between saints were too great. If the cultivators below were brushed by the shock waves, they would be reduced to ashes. In the city of divine kings, the Archaeosaurus and the others were restricted. Therefore, their battle had shifted to the sky. The battlefield was divided into 4 areas, all of which exuded a bone-chilling power. Your target is the heavenly phoenix as well. The person who was fighting the Dark High Priest was shocked. They never thought that Lin Yu and the others would dare to come and steal the bride. They were extremely bold. They didn't think that not only did he come, but he also dared to scheme to save Heavenly Phoenix. Now that the 6-winged Divine King and Lin Yu were fighting, both of them using their strongest techniques. The 6-winged Divine King couldn't spare any more strength to care about where Heavenly Phoenix was imprisoned. The old man in the yellow robe wanted to go forward and stop Puppet Lin Yu's next move. However, it was obviously not going to be as easy as before. It was already very difficult for him to face the darkness god, priest alone. As the yellow springs descended, the old man wanted to cut off the battlefield. However, in the black gas that filled the sky, the violent darkness god priest tore apart the yellow springs river with his bare hands. Not long ago, you were able to suppress me. I wonder if you can do it alone now. The darkness god priest laughed loudly. However, the 6-winged Divine King's forces clearly had ugly expressions. Now that they were pinned down and couldn't extricate themselves, they could only watch as Puppet Lin Yu blasted open one restriction after another. In the chaotic darkness, the divine gold chains rattled and swayed. The temperature of the flames was so high that even the sky was burned to ashes. This was the aura of Heavenly Phoenix. When the last restriction was opened by Puppet Lin Yu, the scene inside was beyond everyone's expectations. Heavenly Phoenix, who was ranked first on the Heavenly Demon leaderboard and had a status comparable to the 6-winged Divine King in the Demon Realm, was not imprisoned here. The divine gold chains here were only binding half of the rotting wings. The aura of Heavenly Phoenix was emitted from these wings. This was beyond everyone's expectations, including the 3 sage realm experts in the 6-winged Divine King's forces. Heavenly Phoenix was not imprisoned here. At this moment, the divine gold chains charged towards Puppet Lin Yu. The 6-winged Divine King's technique was left on it to prevent this day. Puppet Lin Yu was pierced through. Do you all think that Heavenly Phoenix is imprisoned here? Foolish brother, you miscalculated. The 6-winged Divine King naturally sensed everything that happened in the city of Divine Kings. Lin Yu's expression was calm. This didn't change his mood. In fact, he had already anticipated this possibility. The current battle was only to find out more about the 6-winged Divine King. As for the most important thing, it was to take the Yuqing Divine Lady away. The 6-winged Divine King continued to attack Lin Yu, his body emitting a mysterious power. Lin Yu was defeated, blood flowing from the corner of his mouth. Chapter 1089. This power was too terrifying. It did not belong to the Saint Realm, but had surpassed it. If Lin Yu had not used the overlapping of time and space, perhaps he would have been defeated. However, this was enough. He had already understood a part of the 6-winged Divine King's background. Goddess Yuqing stood quietly outside the Deity King Palace, looking up at the sky. Her clothes fluttered, and her slender feet floated on the ground. There was a trace of worry in her cold heart. The 6-winged Divine King's strength was unfathomable. Even if Lin Yu borrowed the power of the Vairocana Buddha, he might not be able to defeat him. Goddess Yuqing knew this well. After all, she had been trapped in the city of the Deity Kings for millions of years. She knew the 6-winged Divine King's strength very well. As for the 6-winged Divine King's trump cards, there were still many that he had not used. Her evaluation of the 6-winged Divine King was now only unfathomable. The truth was as such. Lin Yu was already bleeding. However, the 6-winged Divine King was not feeling very well either. His throat moved as he forcefully swallowed his blood. The benefits of the Deity King's badge are indeed great. The 6-winged Divine King cast a sidelong glance at the aura emanating from Lin Yu's body. Lin Yu's system was the Deity King's badge passed down by the old Deity King. In order to train Lin Yu, the old Deity King had paid a great price. Naturally, Lin Yu's growth had exceeded everyone's expectations. His true strength was at the Emperor realm, But facing the six-winged divine king, who was at the peak of the Saint realm, his expression did not change. He was not afraid. In a battle between saints, everyone kept their trump cards. It was impossible to determine the victor in a short period of time. Lin Yu stood in the sky. The black wings behind him flapped, accompanied by the sound of wind and thunder. The lightning spread out like a huge net, covering half of the sky and taking root in the void. Lin Yu gathered all his means in his hands. The dragon tribe, Azura, the power of the six tribes, including the unifying universe Qi. Lin Yu was going to use his final attack. A powerful force wreaked havoc. The six-winged divine king's expression did not change. He said with a mocking tone, "What is the power you borrowed retreating?" He had been a divine king for a long time, so he naturally had extraordinary insight. How could he borrow the strength of a peak sage realm expert for a long time? Lin Yu was gathering his strength at the moment, so he must be about to go over. At this time, Lin Yu frowned slightly. This was his strongest move. However, from the expression of the six-winged God King, he seemed to be very calm, as if he wasn't afraid. The power the six-winged divine king possessed was too mysterious. Even Lin Yu did not understand it. It seemed to have a decaying effect. However, Lin Yu wasn't worried or fearful about this. At this moment, the overlapping power of time and space in Lin Yu's hand was blazing to the extreme. All of his means and strength had increased by countless times. Even though there were people in the city of God Kings below the sky, they were still able to sense the heart-palpitating fluctuations. It was as if the heavens were about to be torn apart because of this and enter into nirvana. A battle between peak sage realm experts was enough to destroy heaven and earth. Even though the two of them were in outer space, there were fluctuations that could destroy all things spreading. The Archaeosaurs and others on the battlefield were also fighting with all their might. They all used their trump cards, wanting to completely obliterate their opponents. The Archaeosaurs and the Sea God Dragon were worthy of being second and third on the Demon God ranking. They were now at their peak, suppressing their opponents and forcing them to retreat. They had both used 120% of their strength. This was because they all sensed that Lin Yu was making his final attack. At the same time, they also felt the terrifying fluctuations from the six-winged God King. The Archaeosaurs, the Sea God Dragon, and the Dark Divine Priest all wanted to kill a sage before they left. This way, it would be much easier in the final battle. However, it was obviously impossible in a short time. Outer space. Lin Yu was like a banished immortal. His black hair and clothes fluttered with the energy fluctuations. His hands were intertwined with his strongest attack. It was chaotic and dense, as if he had already surpassed the sage realm. This attack would definitely pose a threat to the six-winged God King. However, the six-winged God King was not anxious. His hands moved in front of him. Soon, complex and mysterious runes appeared in the void. Soon, they spread across the entire sky. The black runes were like a huge curtain. Under them, everything seemed to be reduced to nothingness. The living beings below felt the energy fluctuations and felt as if they were about to die. Lin Yu, who was under the curtain of runes, felt it the most intensely. Is this the manifestation of that power? Lin Yu looked at the black runes. He knew that he had achieved his goal. The six-winged God King might want to use this power to sacrifice all living beings to help him break through to the godly king realm. However, Lin Yu had already been completely sealed off by the black rune screen. My brother, die in peace. The six-winged God King's lips curled. You should have died long ago. Why did you appear after 3 million years? You shouldn't have insisted on dying. The six-winged God King sighed. He seemed to be heartbroken. Lin Yu looked at all of this indifferently. I might not be able to kill you today, but you will eventually pay the price. The six-winged God King was disdainful. With just you, one last thing. Hand over the godly king's token, and I will let you die a quick death. Lin Yu did not speak. He closed his eyes slightly and felt the power of the runes that were trapping him. The six-winged God King's face was cold. With a wave of his sleeves, the black runes that filled the sky came crashing down on Lin Yu. One could see the void being destroyed inch by inch. The black runes had the power to destroy everything. They were vast and strange. It seemed to have exceeded the scope of spells. It seemed to involve the origin of the 12 universes. If it was before the heavens and earth were born, it would be the destructive power of the origin. Lin Yu stretched out his arms. His arms drew mysterious lines as his body seemed to transform into a great sun. Blazing light illuminated the world. Not heaven used it at the same time. The six-winged God King mocked. Trying to escape? It's too late. This place had been completely sealed by the six-winged God King. No matter how high one's cultivation was, there was no way one could escape. Looking at Lin Yu, who was struggling, the six-winged God King's face gradually turned ferocious. You have had everything since you were young. You should have enjoyed enough. Die in peace. Yu Qing's wedding still has to continue. Lin Yu was not moved by the six-winged God King's words. As the black runes completely surrounded Lin Yu, the six-winged God King thought that everything was settled. Young God King. The dark divine priest was shocked because he felt Lin Yu's aura gradually dissipating. Goddess Yu Qing's eyes were filled with worry. At the same time, there was a hint of determination. As long as Lin Yu failed, she would commit suicide and accompany him in the afterlife. The dark divine priest wanted to rush to outer space, but was stopped by his opponent. In his anxiety, he was injured. Dark divine priest, don't worry. You must believe in the young God King. The Archaeosaurus reminded. The sea god dragon's eyes were filled with anxiety. If Lin Yu died, everything would be meaningless. Until Lin Yu's aura completely disappeared from the world. The dark divine priest trembled and clenched his fists. The six-winged God King looked at everything coldly from the sky. His aura was so strong that people did not dare to look at him directly. They could not help but kneel down. Father, even your appointed successor is not enough. Ha ha ha. The six-winged God King was laughing. He had abandoned everything in pursuit of status and power. Now that he saw Lin Yu's aura dissipating and no one could threaten him, he finally smiled. Chapter 1090. As for Lin Yu, who was trapped in the sky full of runes, all of his aura had disappeared. It was as if he had never appeared in this world. Qin Yi, who was far away in the Heaven Alliance, couldn't help but tear up. Why do I feel that the most important person to me is gradually fading away in my heart? Not only Qin Yi, but Yuji Kitami and the others also sensed it. But when they suddenly woke up, they realized that they couldn't remember the person in their hearts. Lin Yu, who had betrayed Lin Yu, stood above the Divine King's city and looked at the sky expressionlessly. No one knew what he was thinking. Only someone as powerful as the Divine Priest of Darkness was able to resist this strange power. He still remembered Lin Yu. The power used by the six-winged Divine King was too terrifying. It seemed to involve the most mysterious thing in the world, karma. These runes wanted to completely erase a person from the deepest level. The great sun, boundless Buddha, sat cross-legged in an unknown place. Is this the six-winged Divine King's method? Even he was shocked. Such a strange power was something that he had never seen in all his years of life. What kind of power is this? The great sun, boundless Buddha, opened his palm, and a magnificent light beam illuminated the entire primitive continent. It directly broke through the realm sea in the heaven domain, trying to reflect Lin Yu's figure. But as time passed, he realized that it was difficult to find any traces of Lin Yu's existence in the world. The Jade Pure Goddess stood in front of the Divine King Palace and looked at the sky quietly. Young Divine King, you won't disappear like this. 3 million years have passed, and time has changed. With your talent, how can you die so easily? Yu Qing Divine Maiden murmured. Her beautiful face was filled with determination. Gradually, a hazy halo appeared on her body. Then, illusory shackles appeared. This was the restriction that the six-winged Divine King had placed on her. Now, she wanted to break it by force. And the light feather was her origin power burning. The Jade Pure Goddess didn't hesitate to burn her origin power and pay the price of dying to break free from the restriction. She wanted to go to the sky and receive Lin Yu. The power of the Saint realm spread out. This caused everyone to raise their eyebrows. The Jade Pure Goddess was also an expert of the Saint plane. It was just that she had always been imprisoned by the six-winged Divine King, so her strength was not obvious. As a result, everyone had overlooked her. To be able to become the fiancée of a young Divine King back then, how bad could her talent be? She was definitely a stunning talent in the 3 realms and 5 regions. Now that 3 million years had passed, the Jade Pure Goddess had already broken through to the Saint realm. But now, she was burning the source of the Saint plane. How terrifying was this? The color of the world changed because of it. Strange phenomena appeared. A rain of light continued to fall. It was as if the world was crying. As a woman, the Jade Pure Divine Maiden's life was too bitter. Only a brief moment of pleasure. For the next 3 million years, she was like a bird in a cage, unable to break free. She stayed in the heaven domain, waiting for the person in her heart to return and reverse everything. Now, she didn't hesitate to completely disappear from the world in order to save the person she had been bitterly waiting for. The entire deity king's palace was shrouded in a layer of dense mist. It was like a scene of ascension. At this moment, the Jade Pure Goddess stood in the dense mist like a fairy. She had waited bitterly for 1 million years, all for Lin Yu. Now, all traces of Lin Yu's existence were about to be erased. This was something she would not allow. My life in exchange for yours. It was just a simple sentence, but it represented how determined the Jade Pure Goddess was. She could give up everything for Lin Yu. The glory chi of the entire city of deity kings surged. In just a few minutes, the Jade Pure Goddess broke free from the imprisonment. At this moment, she was carrying a sky full of divine clouds. Her dress fluttered as she flew toward the sky. The zither that was left in the pavilion vibrated slightly, then returned to her hand. The melodious sound of the zither was played between her slender fingers. The entire world was silent. Everyone was immersed in the music. 9 heavens calamity, crossing song. The dark divine priest and the other's expressions changed. It's known as the first divine song in the 3 realms and 5 regions. Legend has it that it was lost in an unknown era. Now, it has reappeared in the hands of the Jade Pure Goddess. The person who fought with the dark divine priest was also extremely shocked. Even he felt threatened by the sound of the zither. This song could break the 9 heavens and 9 underworlds. Legend had it that many saints had died under this song. In a distant era, it was even revered as a forbidden divine song. Once the 9 heavens calamity crossing song was played, all living things in the world had to retreat. However, the Jade Pure Goddess who had burned her origin to escape was too weak. As she played the zither, fresh blood flowed out of the corner of her mouth. It spilled onto her clothes, looking very glaring. Everyone felt sorry for her. The peerless figure who had mastered the 9 heavens calamity crossing song had even reached the Saint realm. Now, in order to bring Lin Yu back, she had chosen to sacrifice herself. Everyone knew that the 9 heavens calamity crossing song could save all living things. It could make one's soul indestructible and pull them back to the real world. At this moment, hearing the melodious sound of the zither, the 6-winged Divine King's expression changed drastically. Jade Pure, what are you doing? With a thunderous scolding, the 6-winged Divine King pointed a finger. He wanted to stop the Jade Pure Goddess. The 6-winged Divine King would not allow the Jade Pure Goddess to die in order to save Lin Yu. The Jade Pure Goddess in the light wings was like a fairy. It seemed that all attacks had lost their effect. However, the bloodstains still showed that the Jade Pure Goddess was severely injured by the finger. However, the zither strings at her fingertips did not stop because of this. On the contrary, the sound of the zither became even more melodious and filled the entire world. The sound of the zither materialized and attacked the black runes. At the same time, it was condensing Lin Yu's true spirit. The 6-winged Divine King was furious. He would not allow the woman he loved to sacrifice herself in front of him to save the person he hated the most. Don't think that I won't kill you. The six-winged divine king's expression was cold. He condensed the power of the runes in his hand again and directly pressed it toward the jade pure goddess. The entire sky was covered by the light wings and the black runes, each occupying half of the sky. No one had expected the jade pure divine maiden's cultivation to be so profound. However, it was difficult for her to do anything against the six-winged divine king. Bang! The zither strings broke. The jade pure goddess's body trembled. Blood splattered on the zither. It was indescribably tragic. With the zither strings broken, the jade pure goddess no longer had the strength to resist. Everyone thought that the jade pure goddess was about to die. The jade pure goddess was peerless in her generation. This was what everyone knew. However, everything was about to come to an end. Young divine king, I wonder if the two of us can meet again in the netherworld. The Yao Qi around the jade pure goddess dimmed. As she slowly closed her eyes, her body slowly fell from the sky. Facing the endless black runes, the jade pure goddess's body seemed so small. Many people could not bear to see this scene. The dark divine priest was even more furious. He had watched the young divine king and the jade pure goddess grow up. However, in the face of all this, he seemed so powerless. The black runes pressed toward the jade pure goddess. Without a doubt, all traces of her existence would be erased. In the 3 realms and 5 domains, can the two of us not meet again? At this moment, a pair of strong arms wrapped around the jade pure goddess's waist. His voice was gentle, and his deep eyes were filled with tenderness. Boom! Lin Yu raised his hand and waved. The black runes that filled the sky were destroyed by him. Young divine king. The jade pure goddess's beautiful face was covered in blood. She raised her hand, wanting to touch Lin Yu's face. Lin Yu held the jade pure goddess's hand and smiled. Have a good sleep. I'll take you away. Chapter 1091. As he spoke, Lin Yu wiped away the blood at the corner of the jade pure divine lady's mouth. Even though his face was very pale and the strange runes could be seen spreading all over his neck, he was still able to see them. But his expression remained unchanged. Lin Yu looked at the 6-winged divine king. You have another reason to die. The jade pure divine lady smiled. She was happy that Lin Yu was not dead. At the same time, she saw the growth of the young divine king in her memory. She could finally sleep peacefully while watching Lin Yu. The 6-winged divine king suppressed his surprise. He did not know how Lin Yu escaped. No living being could escape from the runes he condensed. In the end, all traces would be erased. Even if he was at the peak of the Saint Realm, he believed that nothing could happen to him. Lin Yu hugged the jade pure divine lady and looked at the 6-winged divine king. Sit in the city of divine kings and wait for your death. As he spoke, Lin Yu waved his hand and his figure gradually turned illusory, including the dark priest and the others. They were all disappearing. This was the great solar Buddha's method. At this moment, in an unknown part of the primitive continent, a teleportation array from the bygone era lit up. It connected to Lin Yu and the others. The 6-winged divine king reached out his hand and used the ancient power of the city of divine kings. However, he could not stop Lin Yu and the others. Lin Yu had the divine king badge and could control the city of divine kings. However, it was difficult to do so in a short time with the 6-winged divine king here. However, it was still difficult for the city of divine kings to imprison him. Lin Yu and the others disappeared under the 6-winged divine king's nose. The Archaeosaurus, the dark priest, and the sea god dragon had almost crippled the other 3 saints. The master of the realm's sea was in the dark. He was also led away by Lin Yu. As their figures completely disappeared, the entire city of divine kings fell into silence. Even the wind did not dare to blow. The 6-winged divine king's expression was extremely cold, almost freezing the entire city of divine kings. His 6 wings unfolded, displaying extreme speed. He searched for the imprints left on Lin Yu's body, directly arriving above Realm C. Towering waves surged along with the 6-winged God King's aura. Then he passed through Realm C, arriving above Primitive Continent. The blazing aura illuminated the universe, causing the entire primitive continent to tremble. The living beings on the continent were all trembling as they looked up into the sky. Why are there two suns? Someone was horrified to discover that. The great rivers and seas below were rapidly evaporating. The great lakes were drying up, and the vegetation was drying up. Just the aura emitted by the six-winged God King was enough to cause such a terrifying scene to occur in the primitive continent. At this moment, a sigh sounded. Vairocana Buddha! The six-winged God King looked towards the primordial continent where the sun was. At the same time, his expression changed. With the Vairocana Buddha around, the six-winged deity king was no match for a half-step godly king. The six-winged God King snorted unwillingly before turning around and leaving. At this moment, Lin Yu and the others had already appeared on primitive continent. Within the secret realm, Lin Yu's entire body was covered by the power of the runes, his aura weak. Greetings, Vairocana Buddha. Lin Yu stepped forward politely and bowed to the white-haired elder sitting cross-legged. At this moment, the boundless power on Lin Yu's body was receding like the tide. 2 hours had passed, and Lin Yu had once again returned to his original Emperor realm cultivation. The Archaeosaurs and the others all bowed respectfully. To them, the Vairocana Buddha was definitely a senior. At this moment, even though they were in the Saint realm, they still felt a sense of helplessness before the Vairocana Buddha. This was the most ancient and most powerful existence in the 12 universes. The Vairocana Buddha gestured for everyone to dispense with the formalities and then sighed. I can feel that the six-winged God King's cultivation has already reached the peak of the Saint realm. It won't be long before he surpasses me. When that time comes, primitive continent will no longer be a pure land. Lin Yu's face was very pale, but he nodded in agreement. In the battle just now, I can already feel that the six-winged God King seems to have touched the godly king realm. The dark divine priest and the others' expressions changed. At the same time, they were very surprised that Lin Yu was able to resist the six-winged God King for so long with a power that did not belong to him at the peak of the Saint realm. Even before the six-winged God King used that technique, he could vaguely suppress the six-winged God King. They all looked at Lin Yu in unison. However, Lin Yu shook his head. I had to use all my trump cards in the beginning to suppress the six-winged God King. After 3 million years of accumulation, the six-winged God King had countless resources at his disposal. He was already unfathomable. Lin Yu also knew that in this battle, perhaps he was the only one who had truly broken through to the peak of the Saint realm. Then, he might have a chance of winning. Even if he borrowed the power of the Vairocana Buddha, it would be difficult for him to win even if he did not have the 2-hour time limit. As he spoke, Lin Yu closed his eyes slightly. Your Highness, what's wrong? The dark divine priest looked at Lin Yu and realized that his entire body was currently enveloped by the black runes. They were constantly devouring his life force. It's fine. I purposely used my body to bear this strange power in order to study it thoroughly. This was also one of the purposes of Lin Yu's trip. This was also why Lin Yu did not use the Godly King's token to reset time and space when he was in a desperate situation. This required a great deal of courage to endure pain that ordinary people would not be able to endure. They all knew how terrifying this strange rune was. This was something that could completely erase a person from the origin and Tao levels. The pain that Lin Yu had to endure during this period was almost unimaginable. Lin Yu felt that his life force was constantly slipping away, but he was not afraid. On the contrary, he used the Godly King's token to reset time and space to heal Goddess Yuqing's injuries first. However, she had reached the Saint realm and her origin was injured. Even with the Godly King's token, she still needed some time to recover. Looking at Goddess Yuqing, who was sleeping in his arms, Lin Yu's eyes revealed a rare tenderness. Supreme Buddha, please take care of her. I need to go into seclusion as soon as possible to fully comprehend this strange rune. Lin Yu said. The dark divine priest and the others nodded. This power was too mysterious. Even with their experience, they had never heard of it. Even the Vairocana Buddha did not understand it. Only Lin Yu, who had come into contact with this power on a deeper level and went into seclusion, might be able to comprehend it. Your Highness, will there be any accidents if you do this? Why don't you let me do it? The dark divine priest stepped forward and suggested that the rune be transferred to him so that he could comprehend it. The dark divine priest did not want Lin Yu to take the risk. Lin Yu shook his head. He had the godly king's token. If there was really an accident, he could use the space-time reset function. Only he, who had truly come into contact with this power, was the most suitable person. Hearing Lin Yu's words, the dark divine priest did not say anything else. He knew that Lin Yu had his own reasons for doing things. He would not do things that he was not confident in. This rune might be the reason why the six-winged divine king's cultivation has improved so quickly in this period of time. The Vairocana Buddha analyzed. Lin Yu nodded. This was also his guess. After this confrontation, he also knew that the six-winged divine king was really about to break through. There was no time to delay. Chapter 1092. After this battle, Lin Yu had a deep understanding of the Sage Realm. Feeling the urgency of time, Lin Yu settled the Jade Pure Goddess down and began his closed-door cultivation in the cave abode opened by the great Solar Buddha Lord. After stepping into the cave abode that was isolated from everything, Lin Yu calmed his heart down. He sat down cross-legged, frowning slightly, and black blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. In fact, his current state was much more serious than what the Dark Divine Priest and the others had imagined. He was almost on the verge of death. He was able to safely return to the primitive continent all because of his perseverance. When he sensed that the Jade Pure Goddess was consuming her origin energy to play the Nine Heavens Tribulation song, he began to forcibly break free from the shackles, which was why he was severely injured. If he had not forcibly suppressed it, he might not have been able to withstand the strange power surging in his body when he was in the City of Divine Kings. Lin Yu sat cross-legged, using the power of the Divine King's order to temporarily suppress the strange black runes. This power, he released wisps of it and let wander freely in his body. Even after a long time, he still could not fully comprehend the mysteries within. At this moment, he was in a deadlock with the black runes in his body. I've only been in a deep sleep for such a short time. How did I suffer such serious injuries? At this moment, Baishao's voice rang in Lin Yu's mind. Unknowingly, Baishao's shadow appeared in front of Lin Yu. Baishao's aura had grown even stronger. Clearly, the period of deep slumber had allowed his cultivation to recover a little. And what a strange aura! Baishao looked at Lin Yu, who was now covered in black runes, and frowned in surprise. This doesn't seem like something from the 12 universes. Baishao carefully sensed. She stretched out her claws, but the moment she touched the runes, green smoke rose, and she quickly retracted her claws. Even in her current state, Baishao could not directly touch this power. At this moment, Lin Yu opened his eyes and asked, "Do you know about such things?" Baishao stared at the runes on Lin Yu's body and fell into deep thought. However, she soon shook her head. "It's a little familiar, but I can't recall it. However, this kind of thing shouldn't appear in the 12 universes." However, Baishao's words also enlightened Lin Yu. Perhaps this was not something that existed in the 12 universes. In that case, it was very likely that it was brought here by the living being behind the six-winged Divine King. What was his motive? Could it really be as simple as raising the cultivation of the six-winged Divine King? Lin Yu carefully sensed it. He even used the Godly King badge to analyze it with the power of space-time, try to reverse the flow of time, and trace back to the era in which it was born. An unknown amount of time passed. Lin Yu's consciousness was drawn. Suddenly, he seemed to have arrived at a land of chaos. This place was shrouded in mist, but there was no light. All living things, the continents and oceans, all of them no longer existed. There was no trace of the existence of a world here. Is this the era in which this kind of thing was born? Lin Yu looked around. At the same time, he felt the aura of the 12 universes here, but it was very primitive and weak. It seemed that this was the beginning of the 12 universes. Could it be that these strange runes were originally born in the 12 universes? Lin Yu fell into deep thought. He held the Godly King badge and walked forward. There was no concept of time and space here. Lin Yu did not know how far he had walked or how long he had walked, until a certain moment, he saw a surging black mist in front of him. It emitted a heart-palpitating power. It had already exceeded Lin Yu's understanding. It had definitely surpassed the Saint Realm. He had not even felt this kind of fluctuation from the great Sun Infinite Buddha. Is this the fluctuation of the Godly King Realm? Lin Yu looked at the black mist in front of him. Suddenly, his consciousness felt like it was being torn apart, and it even affected the real world. His spirit was like a candle in the wind, on the verge of collapse. Even his physical body was cracking. In just a moment, he no longer looked like a human. Bai Xiaoli was shocked. What happened? She did not know what kind of horror Lin Yu's consciousness was facing. It actually affected his physical body and spirit in the real world. Fortunately, at this moment, the Godly King badge emitted a gentle halo, enveloping Lin Yu's consciousness and resisting this power. Seeing that Lin Yu's body had stopped disintegrating, Bai Xiaoli let out a long sigh of relief. It was now lodging in Lin Yu's body, and the two were closely connected. If Lin Yu died, it would also suffer great damage. And in the chaos, Lin Yu, with the protection of the Godly King badge, continued to move closer to the black mist. He felt the mighty power of the beginning of the world, and the black mist was constantly spewing out power. Looking at the thin black mist on the periphery, Lin Yu looked carefully and realized that the thin black mist was formed by dense black runes. However, the runes that formed the black mist were clearly more profound. The number of runes far exceeded what the six-winged Godly King had grasped. Lin Yu came into contact with the black mist and silently comprehended it. However, this strange substance was simply too mysterious. Even the God King's badge was unable to reveal everything about it. At this moment, Lin Yu felt that the realm in his body seemed to show signs of loosening. This black substance passed through Lin Yu's consciousness and appeared in his body, fusing into his flesh and blood. Just this little bit made Lin Yu feel like he was about to make a breakthrough. The runes that covered his body, left behind by the six-winged Godly King, retreated like the tide and dissipated between heaven and earth like a frightened deer. This made Lin Yu, who was in an unknown era, feel slightly surprised. However, just coming into contact with this tiny bit of substance had already caused his cultivation to show signs of a breakthrough. If he could grasp it all, breaking through to the Godly King realm would not be a problem. However, Lin Yu soon discovered a clue. As he comprehended the black substance, it seemed that something had also been left behind in his body. He had grasped the 8 divisions of the void and an emperor weapon. His innate divine sense was far sharper than others. This also made him feel that this black substance did not seem to be very good. He had a feeling that if he continued to comprehend it, there might be a day when an uncontrollable change would occur. Lin Yu stopped coming into contact with the black substance. He even used the Godly King badge to purge the black substance that had entered his body. It fused back into the black mist. Lin Yu circled around the black mist. He wanted to see what other substance existed in this world apart from the strange black mist. Lin Yu already had some guesses in his heart. This might be the place before the birth of the 12 universes. Therefore, although the Vairocana Buddha had existed since the birth of the 12 universes, he still did not understand this substance. As Lin Yu moved forward, something appeared in front of him again. It emitted a hazy white light. The white mist was steaming like immortal qi. It was very ethereal. At this time, the depths of Lin Yu's consciousness were affected by the white mist. The black substance steamed out and overflowed. So the origin of my consciousness has also been contaminated by this thing. Lin Yu felt as if the impurities in his consciousness had been cleansed by this substance. The impurities in his consciousness had also been eliminated. Yin and yang are opposites. These two substances reinforce and counteract each other. If I can find the white mist. With these words, Lin Yu's divine sense came to a stop. He tried a few more times to draw the black substance here. Without exception, it was all eliminated. There was not the slightest trace of it left. In the end, Lin Yu was sure that this white substance definitely had a restraining effect on the black mist. If Lin Yu could find this substance, his strength might be able to rise to the next level. He might be able to catch up to the six-winged Divine King in a short period of time. It could also restrain the black mist. Chapter 1093. Lin Yu sat there cross-legged, carefully comprehending. At this point, 2 months had already passed. Lin Yu was completely submerged in the white mist. His figure was hazy and faintly discernible. He was comprehending, trying to decipher the origin of this mysterious substance. However, as time passed, Lin Yu was still in the same spot. There was no progress at all. This substance was too mysterious. Even a saint would find it difficult to gain anything from it. At this moment, Lin Yu was like the first god when heaven and earth were born. He was flawless and did not have the characteristics of a living being. At this moment, his physical body changed again. His cultivation had broken through to the middle stage of the Emperor realm, and he was now a middle-stage martial emperor. Powerful energy gushed out, causing Bai Xiaoli, who was standing at the side, to be shocked. Although this had a lot to do with the enlightenment Lin Yu had gained from fighting the six-winged Divine King, he could not help but sigh at the mystery and power of this substance. If it was ordinary cultivation, Lin Yu might have been stuck at the early stage of the Emperor realm for a long time. However, after comprehending this substance with his consciousness for 2 months, he had broken through again. After reaching the Emperor realm, each advancement took a long time. Not only did it require accumulation, but it also had to do with one's talent. This white substance had obviously made up for Lin Yu's accumulation in time. That was why he could break through so quickly. At this moment, the hazy white light appeared in Lin Yu's body. Bai Xiaoli was now residing in Lin Yu's body and was connected to his mind. When she felt the white substance appear in her body, her injuries were recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. At this speed, Bai Xiaoli would return to her peak in less than a year. What is he comprehending? Bai Xiaoli was delighted and shocked at the same time. Time passed. Another half a month had passed. Lin Yu felt the power of the God King's badge fading. It was time for his consciousness to leave. Even with the God King's badge, Lin Yu could not stay in this place for long. At this time, Lin Yu already felt that his divine sense was on the verge of collapse with a tearing sensation. Lin Yu stood up and exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. This kind of matter should still exist in the 12 universes. Lin Yu made his judgment. Now that the six-winged Divine King was in possession of it, this was the best evidence. If he were to find this material in the modern world, he would be able to obtain it. The simultaneous absorption and contact of his physical body and divine sense would definitely allow his cultivation to advance by leaps and bounds, reaching an unimaginable height. Having reached this point in his train of thought, Lin Yu's eyes glittered brightly. He closed his eyes, and his divine sense returned. Lin Yu's divine sense merged into his body, and he slowly opened his eyes. Feeling the dormant power in his body, he nodded in satisfaction. Let's call this substance the origin item for now. The great solar boundless Buddha was born at the beginning of the 12 universes. Perhaps he might know something about this substance. With that thought in mind, Lin Yu adjusted his aura. Bai Xiaoli, who had been nourished by the origin item, had once again fallen into a deep slumber. The benefits that Bai Xiaoli had gained from Lin Yu's seclusion this time were unimaginable. Her injuries, which would have taken a long time to heal, had already healed by more than half. As long as Lin Yu found this origin item, Bai Xiaoli would definitely be able to return to her peak. Sensing the message that Bai Xiaoli had left behind before she fell into a deep slumber, Lin Yu nodded. Then, he slowly walked out of the seclusion. The Dark Priest and the others were all sitting cross-legged on the ground, quietly waiting for Lin Yu to come out of seclusion. The Dark Priest immediately sensed that Lin Yu had come out of seclusion. At this moment, he was overjoyed. "Your Highness, you are fine." Lin Yu nodded. It was just a fluke. Naturally, they did not think that it was a fluke. When they saw that the strange aura on Lin Yu's body had completely disappeared, it was replaced by an even more powerful cultivation. they were somewhat incredulous. In particular, the Lord of the Realm Sea, who had been brought here, felt very helpless. He had spent countless years, but could not compare to Lin Yu's few months. "Your Highness, have you broken through to the mid-stage Emperor realm?" The Dark Priest was somewhat incredulous. With the God King's medallion concealing his aura, even a sage would find it difficult to detect Lin Yu's true cultivation without revealing it. It was just that he had not deliberately concealed it, so the Dark Priest and the others could sense it. Lin Yu did not deny it. "Have you comprehended the rune?" The Vairocana Buddha, who was sitting cross-legged above, slowly asked. After all, the most important thing right now was to decipher the strange rune. This involved the secret of the six-winged God King's cultivation. It was the most crucial thing. Lin Yu nodded and calmly expressed his thoughts. "If my guess is correct, this substance comes from the 12 universes and was born before the origin era." The primordial Qilin and the others sucked in a breath of cold air when they heard this. They looked at the Vairocana Buddha in unison. The Vairocana Buddha was the most ancient person. Perhaps he was the only one who knew some secrets about the birth of the 12 universes. If that's really the case, then this is rather troublesome. The Vairocana Buddha sighed softly. Something that could make him frown was definitely not that simple. "I don't know if the existence of this substance is good or bad for the origin of the 12 universes. It's no wonder that the six-winged God King was able to touch the threshold of the God King realm in this period of time." At this point, the great solar boundless Buddha Lord nodded his head and understood many things. However, what he said after that was somewhat disappointing. The history before the 12 universes was born was far too mysterious. After all, the heavens and living beings had yet to be born at that time. It was impossible to trace back. As for how the six-winged God King had obtained it, it was impossible to find out. However, Lin Yu was not disappointed. He spoke again. "I used the God King's medallion to trace back the time. At the same time, I comprehended another substance." "What?" The Dark Divine Priest and the others gasped in shock. This was related to the origin of history, but Lin Yu had witnessed another kind of material, and he had even comprehended it. If news of this got out, it would definitely cause a huge uproar. "This substance is the opposite of the black runes. The hidden danger in my body was resolved because of this substance." Lin Yu did not hide anything from the Vairocana Buddha and the others. He told them about what he had seen and heard during his seclusion. The sea god dragon exclaimed at the side. Previously, he was still hesitant. However, after witnessing Lin Yu's courage and talent, he was completely convinced. At this time, Lin Yu could absolutely live up to the title of Little Divine King. "Supreme Buddha, do you know where the place closest to the origin of the 12 universes is?" Lin Yu asked. There was still a trace of the white substance's aura in his body. Perhaps he could use it to find this substance. The Vairocana Buddha said slowly. "The place closest to the origin of the 12 universes is the land under your feet. The primitive land." The Dark Divine Priest and the others had never heard of this secret. They did not expect the primitive land, which was weak in their eyes, to have such a high status. The primitive land was born more ancient than other places. Therefore, it is closest to the origin of the 12 universes. This is also why this land is called primitive. Chapter 1094. Lin Yu nodded. The Mahavarakana Buddha pointed to the east of the primordial continent. Lin Yu looked in that direction. Could it be the Hongming continent? He had woken up from there for the past 100,000 years. Could there be a connection between them? Lin Yu fell into deep thought. However, he had to go back and investigate to gain something. Thinking of this, Lin Yu made a decision. After some discussion, Lin Yu came to the side of the secret land, which was the resting place of Goddess Yuqing. The ancient trees were green, the spring water gurgled, and the fallen leaves flowed with the waves. It was simple and natural. Lin Lu passed through the forest and entered a thatched hut. The Jade-Pure Goddess was lying on a bed made of dried bamboo. Her eyelashes fluttered from time to time on her beautiful face. Lin Yu came to the bed. The Deity King token's space-time reset appeared again. The entire thatched hut was shrouded in space-time energy waves. 2 hours passed just like that. The jade pure goddess slowly opened her eyes. She was still wearing the wedding dress. Her black hair flowed down her neck like a waterfall. You have suffered all these years. Lin Yu smiled. He held the jade pure goddess hand. The jade pure goddess smiled. It wasn't hard. It was all worth it to see you return. Her face was still very pale. She had forcefully broken free from the shackles and used the 9 Heavens Tribulation song. She had damaged too much of her origin. It would be difficult for her to recover in a short time. In the eyes of the world, the jade pure goddess was cold and aloof. She was like a high and mighty fairy who kept everyone at a distance. She would only smile in front of Lin Yu, the young deity king. The jade pure goddess raised her hand and caressed Lin Yu's determined face. Her eyes were watery. She was afraid that this was a dream. She had had too many such dreams in the past 3 million years. The jade pure goddess murmured, "If this is a dream, I hope to sleep forever and never wake up again." Unknowingly, sparkling and translucent tears fell from the corners of her eyes. It made one's heart ache. Lin Yu looked at the jade pure goddess and said with certainty, "It's not a dream. I'm back." Lin Yu felt very guilty towards the Yuqing goddess. Which woman in the world could be so affectionate, guarding for 1,000,000 years just for one person? The two of them looked at each other speechlessly. The jade pure divine maiden mumbled, "Your Highness, help me up." The jade pure divine maiden propped herself up. Lin Yu placed his left hand on her back. The two of them sat side by side on the bed. Goddess Yuqing leaned on Lin Yu's arm and looked at the falling yellow leaves through the window. "I seem to have returned to that time," Goddess Yuqing said slowly. The qi and blood on her face had recovered. Lin Yu smiled. Although he no longer had the memories of his previous life, his body still seemed to retain some sort of instinct that was hidden in its deepest depths. The unique musk of the jade pure divine maiden wafted into Lin Yu's nose through her hair. The two of them sat side by side, waiting for the sun to set in the west. Heaven and earth were shrouded in red clouds. The jade pure divine maiden had a slender figure and a beautiful face. Lin Yu was tall and handsome, with sharp eyebrows and bright eyes. This pair of peerless beauties met again. Even the scenery outside was overshadowed by them. The bright moon rose from the east mountain. The two of them sat like this. "Do you still remember the time when you reincarnated?" The jade pure divine maiden looked out of the window. Her pleasant voice sounded in Lin Yu's ears. "Of course I remember. You were the only woman I saw during my reincarnation," Lin Yu said with a smile. The jade pure divine maiden could offset the power of the divine king's badge against the reincarnation of time. She still had the memory of meeting Lin Yu. Now that he mentioned it, even with the jade pure divine maiden's cold personality, she couldn't help but blush. The two of them looked at each other. The jade pure divine maiden's beautiful eyes were full of love. She looked at Lin Yu with her eyes gradually blurred, and her breathing became rapid. "Your Highness." The jade pure divine maiden's voice was as soft as a mosquito's as she hugged Lin Yu. "Actually, I'm really afraid that one day I won't be able to find you in the 3 realms and 6 regions." Lin Yu stroked the jade pure divine maiden's black hair. He hugged her slender waist. The bright moon was covered by a thin mist. There was endless charm and scenery in the thatched cottage. The red dress had already slipped to the ground. A voice that made one's imagination run wild came out of the room. The night passed quickly. The crisp sound of birds echoed in the forest. The morning glow shone through the window and into the holiday season. A pair of slender white feet came from the bed to the ground and picked up the scattered dress on the ground. After putting on her clothes, the jade pure divine maiden snuggled in Lin Yu's arms with a gentle look in her eyes. It was past noon. Lin Yu and the jade pure divine maiden walked out of the thatched cottage. The jade pure divine maiden had already changed into a bright white dress. The two of them walked side by side. "After the battle, I'll take you to see the mountains and rivers of the world." Lin Yu smiled. Now that the jade pure divine maiden had awakened, he had more important things to do. And the jade pure divine maiden knew the importance of etiquette. She nodded slightly. I'll go with you. The Jade Pure Divine Maiden was also in the Saint realm. Although she hadn't fully recovered from her injuries, she was still an absolute powerhouse in the 3 realms and 5 regions. She had the ability to protect herself. The Jade Pure Divine Maiden was definitely peerless in her generation. Her talent was unparalleled in both ancient and modern times. With her own strength, she had broken through to a realm that countless cultivators couldn't reach in 3 million years. Lin Yu nodded. I don't know what dangers are lurking in this trip. If there are any changes, you can't stay. Retreat as soon as possible. He had the ability to protect himself. But this trip, Lin Yu had already sensed the threat of the origin of the 12 universes in the time reversed by the Divine King's token. Even the Saint Realm was very likely to suffer a calamity. After making preparations and bidding farewell to the Mahavajrana Buddha, Lin Yu led the Dark Divine Priest and the others straight to the east of the primitive continent. A day passed. They came to a human city to rest. The Dark Divine Priest and the others all suggested that Lin Yu's cultivation had improved too quickly and that he needed to experience the mortal world. Otherwise, if he left the world and immersed himself in cultivation, he would eventually stray from the right path. Lin Yu also agreed with this point. On the path of cultivation, one couldn't blindly pursue a higher realm. Staying and comprehending at the right time was more beneficial to oneself. Now, they had arrived at the boundary of the Hongmeng continent. Lin Yu looked at the familiar place with a slight smile on his face. He was familiar with many teleportation formations. However, he had been reincarnating in this continent for 100,000 years. He was most familiar with the mountains and rivers here. Now that he had the Jade Pure Divine Maiden, who had been imprisoned in the Divine King's palace, it was a good time to take her to see the scenery of the Hongmeng continent. The few of them landed in a human city. Then they concealed their auras. If the Dark Divine Priest and the others emitted the cultivation of the Saint Realm, all the living beings here would probably be turned into ashes without exception. After all, the cultivators and living beings in the Hongmeng continent were too weak. Although they had reached the Saint Realm, their breadth of mind and comprehension were equal to everyone. However, in terms of strength, they were still far too weak. Perhaps a casual glance would be enough to annihilate a living being's soul. They all suppressed their auras at the same time, making them similar to ordinary people. No one would notice any clues at all. However, when they saw Lin Yu and the others, many stunned gazes fell on them. Because even though the Jade Pure Divine Maiden deliberately concealed her aura, her beautiful face and cold temperament still attracted everyone's attention. Aren't we too ostentatious? The Jade Pure Divine Maiden frowned slightly. Lin Yu smiled. It's okay. The few of them looked at the bustling streets. From time to time, cultivators crossed the heavenly palace and descended into the city. Vendors hawked their goods, and children walked through the streets. It was a prosperous scene. Chapter 1095. Lin Yu and the others walked on the street, looking around with smiles on their faces. The Archaeosaurs had transformed into the appearance of ordinary beasts. At this moment, they couldn't take their eyes off of the dazzling lineup. I didn't expect a small city to be so prosperous after such a long time. The Dark Divine Priest and the others sneered. Looks like it's not only your highness who needs to train your heart. We all need to train our hearts. Everyone has been away from the mortal world for a long time. Why don't I take you around? Lin Yu shook his head. The Dark Divine Priest bowed. In that case, we'll have to trouble your highness. Under Lin Yu's lead, they found a famous local restaurant. It was crowded here, and the threshold seemed to be about to be broken. A waiter came forward with a towel. Masters, are you going to have a meal or stay? Although Lin Yu and the others had concealed their aura and appearance, the clothes they were wearing were not ordinary. To be able to become a waiter and solicit customers in front of the door, he naturally had good judgment. The Jade Pure goddess followed Lin Yu and frowned. What's a meal? Lin Yu explained patiently. A meal is a meal. There's no need to talk about staying. The waiter came forward and chuckled. Guests, you must be from outside. Lin Yu said familiarly. We're here on order from our sect to buy something. Seeing that Lin Yu and the others had extraordinary temperaments, the waiter didn't suspect anything. So it's you immortals. I didn't recognize Mount Tai. Immortals, you've come at the right time. Tonight, there will be a lantern festival in the city. It will be very lively. Female immortals often live in the mountains. This lantern festival is definitely worth watching. Lantern festival. Lin Yu pondered for a moment. Why don't we rest here for a day? They didn't have any objections and nodded. Immortals, please come in. The waiter flattered. Lin Yu came to the counter. 6 rooms. The child went in familiarly and flipped through the old booklet to see if there were any rooms left. His gaze inadvertently swept over Lin Yu and the others. Dear customer, why do you want 6 rooms? There are stables in the back of the inn that are under special supervision. There will definitely be no accidents. The Archaeosaurus and the sea god dragon jumped up angrily. Their eyes were burning with the true samadhi fire. However, it was quickly suppressed by Lin Yu. With their present realm, they were still unable to bicker with a mortal. These are all divine beasts of the sect. They have already gained sentience and are not much different from humans. I'll give you 6 rooms, Lin Yu said. The Realm Sea Lord's face darkened. The Sea Divine Dragon's status in the Realm Sea was an ancestor-level existence. Now that he had come to this remote place, he was actually being looked down upon by a mortal. However, looking at the Sea God Dragon's expression, one could not help but laugh. The Dark Priest was already laughing at the side. This made the Archaeosaurus and the Sea God Dragon speechless. They glared at the Dark Priest maliciously. All right, I won't laugh anymore. The Dark Priest finally compromised. If he continued laughing, the Archaeosaurus and the Sea God Dragon would probably attack the Dark Priest. The second and third on the Demon God ranking were asked to stay in the stables. If this spread out, they would probably become a laughingstock. The child was also frightened by the primordial Kylan and the Sea God Dragon. He smiled and said, I was blind. Please forgive me, immortal beast lords. The Archaeosaurus and the Sea God Dragon raised their heads arrogantly and did not pursue the matter. The Archaeosaurus said, At least you have a good eye. In the Hongmeng continent, demonic beasts that had gained sentience and could speak human language were not common. Many people, including cultivators, looked over at the same time. Lin Yu and the others did not care. The child glanced at Lin Yu and the Jade Pure Goddess and looked a little embarrassed. Immortals, I'm really sorry. The Lantern Festival is about to start, and there are only 5 rooms left. Lin Yu naturally knew what the child meant, but he did not care. 5 rooms it is. Open them. The Jade Pure Divine Maiden looked at the waiter and frowned slightly. The rooms were opened. The child led them to the attic and went to their rooms. When they went upstairs, the Jade Pure Goddess and Lin Yu stood side by side and said with certainty, the child is lying. There are more than 5 rooms. Lin Yu smiled and did not comment. The Jade Pure Goddess did not know much about the world, but she was not stupid. On the contrary, she was very smart. Although she deliberately suppressed her cultivation, she still noticed some clues. Lin Yu and the Jade Pure Goddess chose the rooms on the right. The Archaeosaurus and the others also chose their rooms. Lin Yu looked at them and shouted, Let's go down together later. I'll bring you to taste the delicacies of the mortal world. The entire restaurant was leaning against the river. Boats came and went inside, and clusters of lotus flowers grew on the side. It was vast and misty. In the sky room, one could enjoy the beautiful scenery. The child stood respectfully behind Lin Yu. Immortal, are you satisfied? Lin Yu nodded lightly and threw a few glory bot to the child. Seeing the glory bot, the child was first stunned, then pleasantly surprised. He had only seen glory bot a few times in all his years in the restaurant. 1 glory bot was worth a few boxes of silver. These immortals are really generous. I wonder which major force they are from. The child was very shocked, but this was not something he could understand. Take the rest of the room money as a reward. Lin Yu waved his hand. The child bowed repeatedly, his head pounding. Thank you, immortal. Thank you. Getting a few glory bot was enough for him to live a stable life. Before the child left, he deliberately closed the door. The two of them stood by the window. Yuqing, did you bring your zither? Lin Yu looked at the jade pure goddess. Yes, do you want to hear it? Lin Yu nodded. The jade pure goddess moved her jade-like hand, and a zither appeared in her hand. Then, she slowly placed it on the table. In the previous battle, many of the strings of the jade pure goddess zither had been broken. This was an ancient sacred artifact. It had been accompanying the jade pure goddess and had already gained sentience. But now, even if it could be reconnected, the artifact's spirit had already been damaged and had almost completely dissipated. The jade pure goddess was a little sad. After all, this zither had been with her for too long. It had been by her side since she could remember. Lin Yu stepped forward. Don't be sad. Maybe I have a way. This is a sacred artifact. Do you have a way to call back its true spirit? The jade pure goddess was a little incredulous. She knew that Lin Yu would not speak without thinking, so there was a hint of joy on her face. Lin Yu nodded. He had now cultivated the sixth part of the great void 8 parts, Mahu Luajia. He could control all the music in the world. Naturally, the zither itself was no exception. Lin Yu's hand was suffused with a mysterious halo and then attached to the zither. In a flash, the zither trembled slightly and seemed to show signs of recovery. The sound of chanting rang out, enveloping the entire zither. 2 hours passed, and the zither was still trembling. Some kind of mysterious energy substance between heaven and earth gathered towards the zither. The brilliance dissipated. The jade pure goddess had already sensed that the zither had recovered. At least, its sentience had been reawakened. Although it would take some time for it to return to its original state, the quality of the zither did not decrease. Under the effect of Mahu Luajia, the zither's grade was even higher than before. Seeing that the zither that had accompanied her had recovered, the jade pure goddess could not hide her smile. You are becoming more and more surprising, the jade pure goddess said. Lin Yu smiled. Is that so? Then he lay on the bed. The melodious sound of the zither was heard. This zither sound that was close to Tao was intoxicating. Although the jade pure goddess had intentionally covered up the sound of the zither, the sound that spread out still caused all kinds of strange phenomena. The lotus flowers in the river bloomed, and the grass and trees below sprouted. It was as if they had entered midsummer from early spring. Some of the cultivators here even broke through the shackles of cultivation that had troubled them for many years under the sound of the zither. At this moment, many of the cultivators were breaking through. There were also some cultivators who had comprehended some obscure divine powers and dharma spells in an instant. As the miracle appeared, some cultivators cried. He was already close to decaying and had no hope of breaking through in this life. But with the ethereal sound of the zither, he had taken a step forward and become an existence that could be called a patriarch. But now, he did not put on any airs at all. Instead, he knelt on the street and bowed to the heavens and earth. Although they did not know where the sound of the zither came from, they were all grateful. There were even some who were weeping bitterly, running through the streets like mad demons. The benefits that mortals received were naturally great. Although they did not break through the realm and comprehend dharma spells like cultivators, they still received great benefits. But all kinds of diseases had to be cured to prolong their lives. In the room, Lin Yu was lying on the bed leisurely, admiring the elegant and quiet jade pure goddess playing the zither in front of him. If anyone saw this treatment, they would definitely be jealous and want to replace Lin Yu. But only Lin Yu could gain the favor of the most beautiful woman in the Qingyun domain, the jade pure goddess. Chapter 1096. Amidst the sound of the zither, the broken flute that the jade pure goddess had been treasuring all this time suddenly moved and floated up on its own. The broken flute appeared in front of Lin Yu. This broken flute was something from Lin Yu's previous life. It was damaged in the battle when the six-winged divine king ambushed the old divine king. The flute and the zither both came from a mysterious ruin. The old divine king took them out and gave them to Lin Yu and the jade pure goddess. It was just that the flute had been damaged so badly that it was beyond recognition. The remaining half was now floating in midair, emitting an ancient aura. In the past 3 million years, the Jade Pure Goddess had spent a lot of effort and paid a huge price. Only then did the ancient flute's intelligence recover. However, it was still in a hazy state. Now that it sensed Lin Yu's aura and the Jade Pure Goddess's zither sound, it showed signs of recovery. Lin Yu held the ancient flute in his hand and smiled. "Old friend." Hearing Lin Yu's words, the ancient flute trembled slightly, as if it was responding happily. Mahu Jia displayed a mysterious power and condensed the other half of the ancient flute. However, this ancient flute was too damaged, and it was difficult to recover to the level of a sacred artifact. In 100,000 years, Lin Yu had learned countless skills, and now he had mastered Mahu Jia, the Great Void 8 divisions. When he held the ancient flute, he played it very naturally. Under his handsome figure, under the sound of the flute and the zither, he seemed unrestrained and natural. The Jade Pure Goddess sat quietly in front of the table. The two complemented each other. It was like a pair of immortals standing alone in a mountain palace filled with immortal mist. With the addition of the sound of the flute, the phenomenon outside became even more intense. A drizzle fell. If one looked carefully, the drizzle was condensed from Yao Qi. It was incomparably pure and made one's pores open and feel comfortable. Just a trace of the melody was missed, and it caused such a phenomenon here. The cultivators in the city all realized that perhaps an unimaginable powerhouse had caused such a phenomenon. The people in the city all knelt on the streets and were grateful. What happened in the human city would definitely cause a huge uproar in the Grand Miscontinent. It would become a legend thousands of years later. After 1 hour, the zither music and flute music slowly came to a stop. The Jade Pure Goddess looked at Lin Yu. At this moment, they seemed to have returned to the time 3 million years ago. "This ancient flute has been with me for so long. Now it should return to the hands of its original owner." The Jade Pure Divine Maiden said slowly. This belonged to Lin Yu in the first place. However, Lin Yu had been severely injured in that battle. He had nearly died, and most of his saint artifacts had been destroyed. This ancient flute was no exception. The destroyed ancient flute had been kept by the Jade Pure Goddess. Lin Yu smiled indifferently. They've been waiting outside for a long time. "Let's go down and eat." Goddess Yu Qing nodded. When he opened the door, the Dark Divine Priest and the others were all smiling. With the cultivation of the Saint Realm, their 5 senses naturally wouldn't be affected by the Jade Pure Divine Maiden's little spell. The sound of the flute and zither could be heard. However, they didn't go in to disturb them. Instead, they waited quietly outside the door. The Archaeosaurus paced back and forth. When he saw Lin Yu and the Dark Divine Priest come out, he came forward. "Quick, quick! I've been wanting to savor the food of the mortal world." The Archaeosaurus didn't have the arrogance of a Saint Realm cultivator. Most of the time, they weren't shrewd and scheming. They went downstairs and found an empty seat. The waiter was observant and alert. He immediately saw that Lin Yu and the others had rested and were now coming downstairs. He quickly handed the work in his hands to others and trotted over to Lin Yu and the others. The Archaeosaurus didn't like the waiter. He was very vengeful. He still remembered that this kid had dared to suggest him to stay in the stable. The waiter took the towel off his shoulder and quickly wiped the table until it was shiny. "Immortals, what would you like to order? We have many dishes. There are those that run in the sky, walk on the ground, swim in the water. We have everything." The Archaeosaurus asked, "Do you have dragon meat?" He didn't get along with the sea god dragon. It was his first time going to Realm Sea, so he showed some disgust. They were ranked 2nd and 3rd on the demon god ranking. Their strength was about the same, so they didn't submit to each other. Before the 6-winged deity king seized the throne, they often fought. The sea god dragon's eyes flashed fiercely. "Do you want to die? Haven't you been taught a lesson before?" The Archaeosaurus raised his head. "I haven't fought for a long time. Why don't you give it a try?" With Lin Yu's help, his strength had recovered to its peak. He had long wanted to test if the sea god dragon had regressed over the years. The waiter was surprised that the two demon beasts could speak human language, but he didn't show it. He smiled apologetically. Immortals, you must be joking. We don't have any dragons. Even if we did, we wouldn't dare to sell them. Dragons were a legendary existence in the primordial continent. Even some demonic beasts with the dragon clan's bloodline were extremely rare and hard to find. The waiter saw that the sea god dragon had the characteristics of the dragon race. Although the waiter was a mortal, he had heard the storyteller by the bridge on the east side of the city describe the appearance of dragons. He knew that Lin Yu and the others were cultivators. The two demon beasts had a powerful background, so he couldn't afford to offend them. The smell of gunpowder was getting stronger. The Realm Sea Master could only smile at the side. In the end, the divine priest of darkness mediated. Otherwise, the sea god dragon and the Archaeosaurus might really start a fight. If they really fought, the entire primordial continent would be in trouble. The two of them snorted coldly and turned their heads to the side, no longer looking at each other. Then let's put up one of the signboards in your shop first, Lin Yu said. He took out a few obsidian stones and gave them to the waiter. The two tables next to him were obviously filled with cultivators. At this time, seeing Lin Yu being so generous, their eyes couldn't help but shine. The restaurant was even livelier than when Lin Yu and the others first arrived. Although there were all kinds of people with different identities and statuses, they were all talking about the same topic. Who was the one who caused the strange phenomenon an hour ago? There were all sorts of speculations about this. However, the benefits they received were too great, so they were all immersed in joy. There were even some people who broke through 2 realms in a row under these consecutive abnormal phenomena, which made people envious. When the dishes were served, the waiter brought a pot of tea and served Lin Yu and the others. Then, he brought a pot of drunken flower eagle. At this time, Lin Yu and the others were drinking tea. They could feel that the people at the 2 tables around them were looking at each other, as if they had some purpose. They seemed to want to use some method against Lin Yu and the others. Obviously, the people at the 2 tables were from the same sect and were out on missions. She began to have devious thoughts about the generous Lin Yu and the others. Especially when they saw the Archaeosaurus and the sea god dragon. Their eyes lit up. 2 intelligent demonic beasts that could speak the human language were too precious and rare. Even in a sect, it was impossible to find such beasts. Now that 2 of them appear in front of them, how could they not be jealous? Chapter 1097. The people at the table were all dressed in luxurious robes with golden patterns embroidered on their shoulders and sleeves. Some of them had just broken through to a new realm not long ago. At this moment, the joy on their faces had not disappeared, and they were already arrogant. They looked at Lin Yu's table at the same time. At this moment, a tall disciple walked forward. "Fellow Taoist, get lost." Before the man could speak, Lin Yu spat out a word. The man was obviously shocked by this attitude. He stood there in a daze, not knowing what to say. His cheeks flushed red. This was because the man realized that under Lin Yu's temperament, he had a feeling of inferiority, as if he could not help but kneel down. He was the eldest senior brother of a first-rate force in this area. Originally, he wanted to go forward and talk with a good attitude to discuss whether Lin Yu would give up the spiritual beasts. However, before he could speak, he encountered this situation, and his expression was very ugly. "Fellow Taoist, I came here in good faith. What is the meaning of this?" The man was unwilling. "I told you to get lost. Didn't you hear me?" Lin Yu sipped his tea calmly, not looking at the man. However, the man felt a chill down his spine. If he went forward to talk, it was very likely that his life would be threatened. However, the man's junior brothers and sisters could not stand it anymore. At this moment, they all went forward to ask for an explanation for the man. They thought in their hearts that if the attitude of the table in front of them was still so bad, they would have a reason to attack. At that time, the 2 spiritual beasts would belong to them. Only the man who came first had a higher realm and felt threatened. He stopped his junior brothers and sisters and shouted, "All of you back down. Senior brother, there's no need to be polite to such a blind person. Just teach him a lesson and he'll be fine." A junior brother grumbled in dissatisfaction. "Shut up," the man shouted again. The person who spoke was livid. They had never seen their eldest senior brother so angry. Moreover, it was for an unrelated person. In order to obtain 2 spiritual beasts, there was no need for him to be so humble. Although there were few spiritual beasts in their sect, it was not that there were none. As a large sect of a region, why would they need to use such a method to obtain 2 demonic beasts with intelligence? Thinking of this, everyone was filled with resentment. Their eyes were about to spit fire. They glared at Lin Yu with unfriendly looks on their faces. If it weren't for their eldest senior brother stopping them, they would have already stepped forward to teach this arrogant person a lesson. Fellow Taoists, I am a direct disciple of the Red Cloud sect. Please forgive me for my presumptuous behavior. The man cupped his hands and squeezed out a smile. To be able to survive outside for so long with this group of good-for-nothings, you can't be considered an ordinary person. Lin Yu glanced at the man from the corner of his eyes. From the beginning to the end, he had never looked at the man in the eye. His cold tone sent chills down the man's spine. The man standing in front felt it the most vividly. Lin Yu didn't reveal the slightest trace of an emperor's aura, but his indifference and absolute calmness were chilling. He was like an emotionless god in the heavens. Even though the man's cultivation had reached the samsara realm, he still felt like an ant in front of Lin Yu. Even though Lin Yu's cultivation was ordinary and no different from a mortal's, the man knew that he was definitely not simple. What did you say? The man's junior brothers and sisters were furious when they heard Lin Yu's evaluation of them. Some of them had already drawn their swords and were ready to attack. Did you not hear what I said? The man's face darkened as he berated them again. After apologizing to Lin Yu and the others, the man led the indignant crowd and hurriedly left after paying the bill. It seems that they went to get reinforcements. After all, the dark priest had been undercover for many years. Naturally, his intelligence was terrifying. Sometimes, even Lin Yu couldn't see through him. It's just a few mosquitoes, Lin Yu said slowly. Ha! Don't let these people affect your mood. The dark priest raised his cup and laughed cheerfully. Then, he looked at the Archaeosaurus and sea god dragon who had dark expressions. Don't you think so? Obviously, they knew what these people were here for. Obviously, they had already seen them as ordinary monsters. If it wasn't for the young divine king, I would have slapped them all to death. Sea god dragon gnashed his teeth. When had he ever suffered such grievances? The Lord of Realm, Sea, sat on the side. Forefather doesn't need to do anything. I can kill them all with a finger. Even their forces will be razed to the ground. Scram! Sea god dragon looked at the Lord of Realm Sea with a solemn face. Realm Sea Lord was stumped, unable to make heads or tails of this. He was clearly working for the Forefather. Why was he being scolded? The Jade Pure Divine maiden picked up a piece of meat and put it in her mouth. She chewed slowly and said, "The taste of this dish is not bad." At their current level, they had already reached the Inedia realm. Food was not essential to them, and they only wanted to taste it. The Dar Priest picked up a piece of meat and put down his chopsticks. He nodded. The atmosphere was slightly relieved. However, the Sea God Dragon and Archaeosaurus were obviously angry. They were looked down upon again and again. At the same time, they were also examining themselves. Were they too ordinary? So much so that these people were unscrupulous. However, after eating a few mouthfuls, they temporarily put down their anger. The Sea God Dragon looked at the way the Archaeosaurus ate with disdain. How shameful! After he ate 2 pieces, he said no more. Then, he stopped talking and began to gorge himself on the food on the table. Not long after, the sumptuous food on the table was finished by the two like a whirlwind sweeping away the clouds. She raised her head, still looking like she hadn't had enough. The food on the Hongmeng continent is not bad. The Archaeosaurus praised. The Jade Pure Divine maiden handed the only preserved food on the chopsticks to Lin Yu. The Archaeosaurus and the Sea God Dragon were too fast. Lin Yu and the others had barely touched their chopsticks. Only the plates were left. Lin Yu called the waiter and ordered a table of other dishes. Those who didn't know better would think that they hadn't eaten for days. The Archaeosaurus and the Sea God Dragon didn't have the aura of a saint. At this moment, they were like 2 hungry beasts fighting for each other's food. I don't know if I'm here to cultivate my heart or to eat with you. We could take care of both. There's no conflict. The Archaeosaurus mumbled with his mouth full of food. The Jade Pure Divine Maiden occasionally picked up food for Linyu. They ordered 5 tables. They had almost finished all the dishes in the restaurant. The Archaeosaurus and the Sea God Dragon were finally satisfied. They paid some more obsidian stones. It was almost dusk. The red sun was setting in the west. The golden light shone on the bluestone pavement. The streets didn't look lonely. On the contrary, it became more lively. Thousands of lights were on. It was a prosperous scene. The Lantern Festival was about to be opened. A large ship appeared in the river. The ship was more than 100 feet long and was divided into 3 levels. There were festive red lanterns hanging on it. It was very magnificent. Chapter 1098. Lin Yu and the others went out of the restaurant and walked towards the riverbank. Behind them, a waiter politely sent them off. The waiter was very moved and inadvertently teared up. This is the true breadwinner. Outside the city, the Red Cloud sect disciples seemed to be waiting for someone. Some of the disciples had murderous intent on their faces. As a first-rate force in this area, when they went out to travel, everyone was respectful to them. They had never been wronged like this. To be safe, they even ran out of the city. The Red Cloud sect's senior brother was somewhat calm. At this time, he was sitting cross-legged on the crouching ox rock, holding his breath. Obviously, after a long time, he had calmed down from the fear of Lin Yu. He looked at the ignorant junior brothers and sisters and was somewhat distressed. After being in the sect for so long, they were used to living in an ivory tower. It seemed that they were a bit stupid. They didn't even perceive Lin Yu's aura. Junior brothers and sisters, don't be anxious. The Supreme Elder will meet his old friend here today. When the time comes, those people will be taken down, and you can vent your anger. The Red Cloud sect's senior brother comforted them. When they heard this, they were all overjoyed and looked forward to it. What kind of existence was the Supreme Elder? It was said that he had reached the peak of the transcendent realm. Such a person, if placed a few years ago, would definitely be a big figure. His appearance would cause a huge uproar. Now that the sect's Grand Elder was here, how much more arrogant could that arrogant brat be? Thinking of this, their depression was swept away. However, there were also some people who were dissatisfied with the senior brother's decision. I think that person is just pretending to be calm. He doesn't have any real strength. Yes, senior brother, you are too cautious. My Red Cloud sect is in this area. Someone dares to provoke us. Everyone was discussing animatedly. Chi. A rainbow light appeared in the sky. At this time, an old man with white hair and a youthful face rode a gourd and landed in front of everyone. Greetings, Supreme Elder. Greetings, Supreme Elder. Everyone knelt on the ground and respectfully saluted. Chair, why didn't you enter the city? The highest elder looked at the eldest senior brother of the Red Cloud sect. Within a few hours, the news of the strange phenomenon in the city had spread across the entire area, causing the other sects to be extremely shocked. There were people who wanted to deduce exactly who was causing this abnormal phenomenon. However, this was more complicated than the Grand Miscontinent's heavenly secrets. Some people who tried to forcefully deduce the heavenly secrets almost lost their lives because of it. The Red Cloud sect's Grand Elder had come to see his old friend and also to investigate. The Red Cloud sect's eldest senior brother roughly explained the situation and specifically reminded Lin Yu. In this area, he dares to treat the Red Cloud sect's disciples like this. It seems that he is tired of living. The Red Cloud's sect's Supreme Elder shouted, I will go and meet him. Moreover, the disciples of the Red Cloud sect walked out of the restaurant with their tails between their legs under the watchful eyes of the crowd. This matter involved the dignity of a sect. The old man riding the bottle gourd was the sect's Supreme Elder. He had the responsibility to seek justice for the disciples and establish the prestige of the Red Cloud sect. Lead the way. The Grand Elder looked at the brightly lit city. He calmly put his hands behind his back and put away the bottle gourd. Yes, the Red Cloud sect's eldest senior brother respectfully cupped his hands. They all knew that the white-haired Grand Elder in front of them was the strongest person in the Red Cloud sect. He had even witnessed the Grand Mist battle. This was also the reason why his cultivation was so profound, and there were faint signs of a breakthrough. The Red Cloud sect's disciples followed behind the Grand Elder. Their clothes and aura were extraordinary. As they walked on the road, it was inevitable that they would attract people's attention. Aren't they the Red Cloud sect's disciples? Yes, I just saw a group of their disciples suffer in the Lanfang restaurant and run out of the city with their tails between their legs. The person in front seems to be the Red Cloud sect's only Grand Elder. If those people in the restaurant didn't leave, I'm afraid they will be in trouble. The cultivators and mortals in this area all knew about the Red Cloud sect and didn't dare to provoke them. At this time, they were waiting for them to leave before they dared to whisper. They didn't dare to provoke the Red Cloud sect. However, these people's conversation clearly fell into the ears of the Red Cloud sect's Grand Elder and the Grand Elder. Their complexions were somewhat ugly. If they didn't solve this matter, they were afraid that it would affect the prestige of the Red Cloud sect. The Red Cloud sect's disciples had suffered in front of a young man whose name they didn't even know. They had been scared away. If this spread out, they were afraid that they would become a laughingstock for a very long time. Grand Elder, please forgive me. That person gave me an extraordinary feeling. For the safety of my fellow disciples, I could only retreat. The Red Cloud sect's Grand Elder's face was very ugly. He bowed to the Grand Elder. It doesn't matter. This old man will personally go and find him. Everything will be easily solved. The Grand Elder comforted him. You're the hope of my Red Cloud sect. In the near future, you are expected to inherit this old man's mantle. Be careful in the outside world and ensure your safety. There is nothing wrong with that. The Red Cloud sect's Grand Elder was very moved. Thank you, Grand Elder. The disciples behind him showed an envious expression. The mantle of the Red Cloud sect's #1 disciple. His future achievements were absolutely limitless. The disciples had decided to properly climb up to the Grand Elder. In the future, their days in the sect would certainly be very comfortable. Moreover, if the Grand Elder had a breakthrough, he would be the #1 person in this region. At that time, the entire region would follow the Grand Elder's lead and become the leader. At that time, the Red Cloud sect's Grand Elder would inevitably become the Grand Elder of this region. Sitting on endless resources, wouldn't his cultivation be soaring to the sky? They looked at the Grand Supreme Elder with respect. This was their Red Cloud sect's prestige. As long as he appeared, everyone would give him face. They didn't know if that young man would be scared witless after seeing this. This was what they were happy to see. Feeling the humiliation and feeling the strange gazes around them made them gnash their teeth in hatred. They couldn't wait to immediately suppress this kid who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, make him kowtow a few hundred times and obediently admit his mistake. Now that the Grand Elder had personally come to punish him, perhaps that person's performance could be considered good. Following the crowd to the restaurant, a disciple personally went in to inquire about the situation, but after inquiring, he learned that Lin Yu and the others were no longer in the restaurant. Instead, they went to the riverside to watch the Lantern Festival. After offending the Red Cloud sect, they still dare to be so leisurely. I don't know if they have a big heart or are born with low intelligence. Some people sneered. As long as Lin Yu and the others were still in the city, it was good. They didn't have to go out of the city to track them down. The Grand Elder also met with an old friend. His old friend was a gray-haired old man. He was casually dressed, wearing a cloth robe, and looked somewhat sloppy. However, at this time, his face was glowing without the slightest trace of old age. Old ghost, you broke through. The Grand Elder was somewhat inconceivable. Both of them had been stagnant in this realm for too long, so much so that their life was about to be exhausted. Now that the Grand Elder had come out, he was looking for an opportunity to break through. Chapter 1099. The seemingly ordinary old man in front of him smiled casually. If it wasn't for the mysterious rhythm during the day, perhaps this life would be hopeless. After today, We can only meet on the road to the underworld. This made the great elder very jealous. If it weren't for the presence of a younger generation, he would have already stamped his chest. This breakthrough, I have a lot of insights. You can stay here for a few days, and I will tell you. The old man said seriously. Okay. The great elder nodded, but then said, I have a small matter to deal with. Old ghost, do you want to come with me? The old man looked at the red cloud disciples behind the great elder and naturally guessed what was going on. He didn't want to get involved in the affairs of the sect. But now that he had broken through, he was in a good mood. This area must have forgotten about the old ghost. Let's go and have a look. The red cloud disciples were all excited. From the conversation between the old man and the great elder, they had already learned that the seemingly ordinary old man in front of them had broken through to the invincible realm. In this area, he was already a legendary existence. Now that they could witness such a person in action, it would definitely be of great benefit to their cultivation. The Red Cloud senior brother was also full of hope. After asking, the great elder and the old man walked side by side to the riverbank. At this time, the Lantern Festival had already begun. The lotus-shaped lanterns floated on the surface of the river. Their reflections on the sparkling surface of the river gave off fragmented light and shadows. Lin Yu and the others at this time paid the Yao bot, came to the boat, and found a place to sit down. On the deck, there were enchanting dancers, dressed in gauze, with cinnabar on their foreheads, twisting their waists under the sound of bells and drums. Contrasted with the lights, they attracted most of the attention. The J-Pure goddess also watched with great interest. After all, these were all new things for her, and she had never seen them before. At this time, among the crowd on the boat, there was a little girl in rags, holding a box bigger than her body. Her eyes were timid, and she carefully asked the guests who were sitting. But most of the time, she was looked at with disgust, because the little girl's dress was really a bit of a spoilsport in this lantern festival. Her weak body, moving with the crowd, was like a leaf on the water, swaying from side to side. It was not easy to walk inside. Master, do you need a lantern? I made it myself. It only costs 5 copper coins. The girl's eyes were filled with hope. Get lost. Don't disturb me from watching the dance. The little girl was pushed away impatiently. However, that person had used too much force and didn't care at all. In front of him was only a 7- or 8-year-old child. Moreover, because of the lack of food and clothing, his body was very thin and weak, and his face was sallow and emaciated. Before she could react, she staggered and fell to the ground. The lanterns fell to the ground. It was trampled to a pulp by the passers-by. The little girl hurriedly knelt on the ground, wanting to pick up the lantern. However, there were too many people coming and going who would notice the lantern under their feet. Even if they saw it, they would only curse in disdain for dirtying their feet. The little girl put the intact lantern back into the wooden box and apologized to the person who pushed her. Master, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to block you. The man's eyes were fixed on the splint, and he had no time to pay attention to the little girl. Even if she didn't get a response, she still murmured. She urged the already broken lantern. Unconsciously, tears fell from her eyes. Mother, your is disappointing. I didn't sell the lantern and even broke so many, but soon she tried to hold back her tears and continued forward. However, after this, she became even more timid. She would observe and hesitate for a while before going forward to ask. Unknowingly, the little girl arrived at the position of Lin Yu and the others. The Archaeosaurus and the others were already nowhere to be found. The Realm Sea Master was also forced to follow. The little girl stood beside Lin Yu for a long time before she gathered her courage. Young Master, young Miss, did you buy a lantern? This is made by Mother and I. It's very beautiful. The little girl took out an intact lantern and stood to the side. She was afraid of blocking Lin Yu and the others' line of sight. She was at a loss. The Jade Pure Divine Maiden squatted down and looked at the bunny-shaped lantern in the little girl's hand. She smiled sweetly. It's really beautiful. How much is it? Seeing that the Jade Pure Divine Maiden was interested, the little girl was very happy. 5 coins. No, I accidentally dropped the lantern just now. Sister Immortal, 3 coins, is that okay? The little girl held the lantern, her watery eyes filled with hope. The jade pure divine maiden looked at the back of the little girl's red and swollen hand. It was obviously stepped on when she was picking up the fallen lantern. The jade pure divine maiden stroked the little girl's red and swollen hand, frowning slightly. Does it hurt? It doesn't hurt. The little girl shook her head. Little girl, how many lanterns do you have? Lin Yu stroked the little girl's head and asked with a faint smile. Young master, you mean? The little girl blinked her black eyes. And I want all of them. Lin Yu nodded. Oh, this? Lanterns. Each person can place one by the river and make a wish. The little girl suggested. We still have a few people here. The jade pure divine maiden smiled sweetly. This was completely different from her cold appearance in the heaven region, as if this was the real jade pure divine maiden. Oh, then let me count. 1, 2, 3. The little girl put the wooden box on the ground, took out the lantern seriously, and stood up. There are a total of 7 in good condition. Young master, since you bought so many, I'll buy 1 for 2 coins. What do you think? The little girl had carefully calculated the 14 coins. 10 coins to buy medicine for her mother, and the rest could be used to bring back 2 tails of meat for today's lantern festival. Lin Yu took out a few pieces of silver and gave it to the little girl. Young master, you're giving too much. I can't accept it. The little girl was obviously shocked when she saw the shining silver. For ordinary mortals, copper coins and silver coins were still the common currency. A few pieces of silver were too valuable for the little girl, enough for her and her mother to eat for a few months. My mother taught me not to be greedy. Honesty is important in doing business, and I can't accept too many customers. The little girl continued. At this time, the person in charge of the ship noticed this. Where did this little beggar come from? Asking for money here. Dear guests, I'm really sorry, we were careless. As he spoke, the burly man stepped forward and was about to throw the little girl off the ship. The little girl's face was filled with fear, and she was a little stunned. We brought this up, what are you doing? Lin Yu said indifferently, and threw a few obsidian stones over. The burly man took the obsidian stones and was overjoyed, immediately stopping. So it's the guests who brought her on the ship. Then it's fine. I hope the 3 of you have a good time on the ship. You can get lost. Lin Yu said indifferently. Okay. The burly man left with a smile. Were you scared? The jade pure divine maiden touched the little girl's head. No. The little girl shook her head. Young master, miss, don't you think I'm dirty? Those guests seem to hate me. Lin Yu said, it's not the appearance that's dirty, it's the heart. He seemed to have understood something and said to the little girl with a smile. The jade pure divine maiden took the broken silver. Take this, sister likes you. The lanterns you made are worth this price. The jade pure divine maiden carefully put the silver in the little girl's hand. At the same time, her palm emitted a gentle power, healing the little girl's injuries. Thank you, miss. Sister sounds better. The jade pure divine maiden scratched the little girl's nose. Big sister. The little girl was a little embarrassed. Her eyes were a little moist, and she was very touched. At this time, the people of the Red Cloud sect and the old man flew up to the ship. The breathtaking aura shocked all the people here, and all the voices came to an abrupt end. The dancer dressed in gauze hurriedly retreated. In the restaurant were the people who offended my Red Cloud's sect disciples. A disciple of the Red Cloud's sect shouted. His voice formed layers of chi waves, and some of the lanterns on the river shattered. Can you accompany Big Sister here? Lin Yu said to the little girl with a smile. Young master, are they here to look for you? The little girl asked. The people who wear these clothes are the fiercest. You have to be careful. Don't worry, they can't do anything to Big Brother. Big Brother is very powerful. The jade pure divine maiden said with a smile while holding the little girl's hand. The scene was silent for a while. Some people felt the pressure of the great elder and didn't dare to breathe loudly. At the same time, some cultivators recognized the great elder's identity and were shocked. Chapter 1100. The Red Cloud sect's Grand Elder, apart from the old devil Tong Yu, is the strongest person in this region. Some people held their breath and looked at the old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion. Everyone was retreating, and soon they were 10 feet away from the Grand Elder. Which blind person dares to offend the Red Cloud Sect's Grand Elder? Is he tired of living? In the past few years, the Red Cloud Sect has been like the sun in the sky, vaguely having the power to annex other sections. No one dares to provoke them. When an older cultivator saw the person standing side by side with the Red Cloud Sect's Grand Elder, he fell into deep thought, and then his face suddenly changed. He is the old Devil Tong Yu. The old Devil Tong Yu had disappeared from the world of cultivators decades ago. There were rumors that he had reached the end of his life and had passed away in some place. But now, he had reappeared in this world. That aura made people more and more unable to see through it, like an abyss, making people involuntarily tremble. It seems that the world has not forgotten me. The ordinary old man, at this time, had a smile on his face and nodded with satisfaction. The most recent time, he had witnessed the Hongmeng duel with the Red Cloud Sect's Grand Elder. After that, he had been in seclusion. Finally, he felt that there was no hope for a breakthrough and began to play in the world of mortals. After living in this city for a period of time, he did not expect that under a coincidence, there would be a mysterious sound that would help him break through. Now, he was absolutely invincible in this region. Everyone who faced him trembled, their faces showing shock and fear. It seems that offending the Red Cloud Sect's Grand Elder is not going to live. Someone sighed. Time passed. It seems that person has already escaped. Many people did not despise him. After all, if he stood up, he would have to face the two top figures of this region. Thinking about it, if they were that person, they would probably escape even faster. Grand Elder, that person has two demonic beasts. It seems that their bloodline is not ordinary. You can just take them as mounts. The Red Cloud Sect's Grand Elder reminded. Oh, is that so? The old Devil Tong Yu closed his eyes, and his divine sense swept out like a wave. He was searching every corner of the ship. Even a mosquito could not escape his detection. Everyone felt a heavy pressure, including the person in charge of the ship, but no one stepped forward and dared to voice an objection. Are you looking for me? At this time, an indifferent voice sounded in the crowd. Hiss! Everyone present sucked in a breath of cold air. This person is really bold, daring to show himself now. So young. Indeed, newborn calves are not afraid of tigers. Everyone discussed in their hearts. The crowd automatically opened up a path for him. He could see that Lin Yu's figure was tall and straight. His face was handsome, and his temperament was extraordinary. However, in everyone's eyes, that was all there was to it. Even if you were a genius of your generation, in front of the ceiling of the older generation, it was still not enough to look at. What's hard is easy. Someone sighed. Although they could sense that Lin Yu had not revealed his cultivation level, they could tell from his aura that he was definitely extraordinary. While everyone was either wringing their hands and sighing, or waiting for the Red Cloud Sect to make a move, Lin Yu had already entered the arena. Only now did the Red Cloud Sect's highest elder clearly see Lin Yu's appearance. The expressions of the Red Cloud Grand Elder and Old Devil Tong Yu gradually changed from calm to gloomy. Finally, their expressions became twisted and changed greatly. They saw Lin Yu's face clearly. Then, something unexpected happened. The Red Cloud Sect's highest elder and Old Devil Tong Yu, at this moment, actually knelt on the ground with a plop. Forgotten immortal sect, young Saint King. This was Lin Yu's identity in the Hongmeng continent. The Red Cloud Sect's highest elder and Old Devil Tong Yu had witnessed the Hongmeng battle. The most shocking thing was that the young Saint King of the Forgotten Immortal sect was decisive and ruthless. In the end, he even killed the 7 Yi Demon Emperor. This kind of battle record was simply terrifying. Lin Yu's appearance had been thoroughly engraved in their hearts. In the end, Lin Yu took the Saintess and Sect Master of the Forgotten Immortal sect to a wider world. Why did he return now? Why are you looking for me? Lin Yu came in front of the two and asked indifferently. Everyone was shocked. Their jaws dropped to the ground. Some people's mouths formed an O shape. They looked at the scene in disbelief. The Red Cloud sect's highest elder, and old Devil Tong, you were trembling all over. Obviously, they were scared out of their wits by this appearance. Highest elder, you can't stand firm? A Red Cloud sect's disciple still didn't understand. He wanted to support the highest elder and show off. He had just entered the sect and came from a big family, but his brain seemed to be lacking a few tendons. The eldest senior brother of the Red Cloud sect was trembling all over. Others didn't know the name of the forgotten immortal sect's young Saint King, but as a direct disciple of the Red Cloud sect, how could he not know? Although he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, the name of the young Saint King had been set as a taboo in the Hong main continent. Almost no one dared to mention it. He knew that everything was over, and that disciple still wanted to help the highest elder up. Slap! The Grand Elder raised his sleeve and sent the disciple flying with a crisp slap. He crashed through the railing and flew out for an unknown distance. On the surface of the river, he was several dozen feet away and no longer looked like a human. Young Saint King, please spare my life. Young Saint King, please spare my life. This disciple had eyes but failed to see, disturbing your refined mood. I am here to apologize. The highest elder of the Red Cloud sect knelt on the ground, not daring to breathe. They had also guessed that the rhythm during the day was also Lin Yu's doing. Thanks to the young Saint King's kindness, this little one was lucky enough to break through in the rhythm. Now that I've seen the real face, I am grateful. Tong, you old ghost, knelt on the ground with a respectful attitude. There were many people whose status and knowledge were too low, so they had never heard of Lin Yu's name. But in the Hong main continent, this name had become a taboo. They had thought that they would never meet him in their lifetime, especially for a sect like the Red Cloud sect, which was a second-rate sect in the Hong main continent. They had never thought of meeting him. But now they had really encountered him. If today's matter was not resolved properly, it was very likely that the entire Red Cloud sect would be annihilated in the dust of history, never to exist again. The Red Cloud sect is very awe-inspiring, Lin Yu said coldly, his face full of disdain. The change in attitude of the highest elder of the Red Cloud sect really made people speechless. But when they knew who they were facing, they would not have this kind of expression. Lin Yu's words didn't contain his cultivation base, but the pressure of the sky made the bones of the Red Cloud's sect's great elder and old devil Tong Yu creak, as if they were about to break. I heard the Red Cloud sect is tyrannical in this area. Is that right? Lin Yu learned about the Red Cloud sect's behavior from the mouth of the little girl. To be able to make a child of the mortal world so afraid, the Red Cloud sect's behavior was already despicable. As a cultivation sect, they were arrogant and bossy in the mortal world. This kind of behavior was no different from that of a local ruffian. This lowly one did not discipline them properly. In a sect, it is inevitable that there will be rats. When this lowly one returns, I will strictly discipline them. The highest elder of the Red Cloud sect trembled all over. Saying this, he waved his big sleeve, and the disciple behind him screamed miserably. Many of his bones were broken, and he staggered left and right. Finally, the highest elder of the Red Cloud sect carried him and made him kneel in front of Lin Yu, including the first senior brother of the Red Cloud sect. At this time, all of them were covered in blood, and their auras were dispirited as they knelt on the ground. The highest elder of the Red Cloud sect did not dare to use small tricks to take the overall situation into consideration. The first senior brother of the Red Cloud sect also did not dare to be an exception. Chapter 1101. Lin Yu looked at this scene indifferently and did not speak again. He turned around and left. The Red Cloud Grand Elder and the others did not dare to move. They kept kneeling on the ground, cold sweat dripping down their backs. After what happened on the ship, they were no longer in the mood. Lin Yu and the Jade Pure Goddess took the little girl off the ship and came to the riverside. The Archaeosaurus naturally felt the movement on the deck. Now that he appeared, he glanced at the Red Cloud Grand Elder. This glance almost made the Red Cloud Grand Elder faint. His soul felt like it was being torn apart. It was as if he was facing a supreme being. The Red Cloud Grand Elder was scared. He cursed in his heart. These disciples did not open their eyes. What kind of existence did they provoke? They opened their mouths and could speak the human language. It was definitely an existence beyond imagination. Perhaps Lin Yu brought it from a higher plane. These disciples were stupid enough to want to take it for themselves. They were simply reckless. At the same time, he also realized that the Red Cloud sect had developed too well these years, making some disciples too arrogant. They did not have a respectful heart. He was afraid that one day they would bring disaster to the Red Cloud sect. He could not see through Lin Yu's thoughts. Perhaps when they finished their tour, they would go to the Red Cloud sect and destroy the sect. Thinking of this, the Red Cloud Grand Elder did not dare to breathe. Now, how could he care about his face? Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, he did not dare to move. He kept kneeling on the deck to atone for his sins. Even if he had to kneel on the ship for a few days, as long as the Red Cloud sect could survive this crisis, it was worth it. After all, people like Lin Yu were beyond their understanding. It was possible that he was temperamental. After all, this time, the Red Cloud sect disciples had spoken ill of him. It was good that he did not kill them. On the side, Tong Yu Old Ghost was about to cry. He just came to see. Now that he had just broken through, he had not yet enjoyed the world's awe. He was the first one to kneel. He cursed the Red Cloud Grand Elder in his heart. This deceitful guy. Before coming, he did not ask in advance who the Red Cloud sect had offended. Even if he did not know the name, he should have at least asked about the appearance. However, there was no point in thinking about this now. Looking at the Red Cloud sect's people kneeling on the ship, some people secretly rejoiced. Some ordinary people who had been oppressed for years were very happy to see this scene. The disciples of the Red Cloud sect were like the heavens in this area. No one dared to disobey them. Many people suffered greatly from it. Now that such a scene had occurred, if the Red Cloud sect still existed, they would absolutely not dare to act like before. Lin Yu did not care too much about the Red Cloud sect. For him, such a small sect was not worthy of his attention. This time, it was just a small punishment. To him, flattening a sect like this was nothing more than the snap of a finger. It was just that his realm and cultivation had risen. There was no need for him to say more than a few words over such a small matter. The few of them came to the riverside. Lanterns flowed down along with the waves from upstream. Candles stood among the lanterns, emitting a faint light. The Jade Pure Divine Maiden held the rabbit flower lantern in her hand. She twirled her fingers and lit up the candle. She slowly placed it in the water and slowly flowed downstream. The people here took the initiative to open up a path. Everyone was guessing Lin Yu's identity, to be able to make the people of the Red Cloud sect bow and bend their knees. Now, they were kneeling on the deck of the ship and had yet to get up. This kind of identity made everyone afraid. Therefore, when Lin Yu and the others arrived, the people who were releasing the lanterns stopped and stood aside respectfully. The Jade Pure Divine Maiden sighed. This kind of feeling is not good. As their identity was exposed, everyone was in awe of them. So much so that they lacked the feeling of traveling the mortal world. Lin Yu did not comment on this point. Although he had used a divine ability to make everyone forget what had just happened, doing so made him feel like he was deceiving himself. It was better to let nature take its course. The little girl took out a folded lantern from her bosom and unfolded it. Her mother's name was written on it. You still have some private goods. The Jade Pure Divine Maiden teased. No, this is to pray for my mother. Every year, I will leave one for her. The little girl shook her head and said seriously. The little girl did not have enough to eat or wear, but she always missed her mother. In this aspect, she was much better than the people of the world. Lin Yu had experienced 100,000 years of reincarnation, and his emotions were as indifferent as a god. However, he still had softness in his heart. He would leave the best for his friends and family. Perhaps this was the meaning of refining the heart. It could make a cultivator who had abandoned everything find the truth in their path. Lin Yu's cultivation became more and more condensed. His martial emperor cultivation had completely stabilized. The hidden danger of his cultivation advancing by leaps and bounds was also eliminated. At this moment, he felt that he had completely grasped the power of the Middle Emperor realm. He could use it as his own arm without the slightest sluggishness. Lin Yu closed his eyes. A stream of qi followed the street and came to a small alley in the east of the city. Finally, it entered a shabby, mud-tiled house. The little girl's mother was lying on the bed. As the stream of qi entered her body, the violent coughing stopped. Her pale face also recovered, and a rosy color appeared. Then, Lin Yu touched the little girl's head. A stream of qi entered her body and cleared her meridians, allowing her to step into cultivation. This was the karma between him and the little girl. Because of the little girl, he had stabilized his cultivation. Naturally, he had to pay a price. He seemed to have understood something. The power controlled by the six-winged divine king was drawn from all living things in the universe. One day, it would come to an end. Lin Yu's lips curled into a smile as he gazed at the rippling surface of the river. He did not interfere with the trajectory of the little girl's life. The next morning, the few of them walked out of the restaurant. They were ready to leave the city and search for traces of the origin substance. It was only dawn when they arrived at the city gate. The little girl was already waiting here. Her mother was holding her hand. Their tattered clothes could not keep out the cold. Their lips were blue from the cold. The mother and daughter's clothes were too tattered. They were originally waiting outside the restaurant, but they were chased out. Thus, they came to the city gate. "Why are you here?" Goddess Yuqing stepped forward. "Exen said that the immortals are leaving today, so I've been waiting here." With that, the little girl's mother knelt on the ground with a plop and kowtowed 3 times. The little girl also knelt on the ground. She followed suit and nodded. "I've been sick for many years. Thank you for your help, immortals. I can't repay this kindness." The little girl's mother knelt on the ground with a bamboo basket in her hand. There were a dozen eggs in it. It was the most precious thing in their family. "Auntie, please rise." Goddess Yuqing helped the 2 of them up. The dark divine priest smiled. "I've never seen Goddess Yuqing like this in the heavenly region." Chapter 1102. Thank you, Big Brother and Big Sister. The little girl's dark eyes were filled with gratitude. She had been smart since she was young. Her mother could recover. The little girl knew that it must be Lin Yu who helped. Although Lin Yu didn't give the mother and daughter anything substantial, they didn't have to worry about food and clothing and lived a life of luxury. But to the mother and daughter, health was the best thing. And now that the little girl's mother had recovered from her illness, she wouldn't let the little girl live so hard anymore. "I've always been a burden to the child. Now that she has recovered, really. With that, the little girl's mother's eyes reddened, and she was about to kneel on the ground and kowtow again. Goddess Yuqing supported the little girl's mother. "This is my karma with her. You don't have to do this," Lin Yu said. The little girl sensibly wiped away her mother's tears. "Mother, you didn't burden me. Xian has always been very happy. You can let Xian join the sect." Lin Yu took out a token with the words "Forgotten Immortal" engraved on it. This place wasn't too far from the Forgotten Immortal sect. They could use the teleportation array, and it wouldn't take much time. Although Qin Ji and the others had left, they still left behind their orthodoxy in the Hongmeng continent. The Forgotten Immortal sect had Lin Yu's fame and developed well. It was now the largest sect in the Hongmeng continent. When the little girl went there, she would also be able to receive very good training. "You and your mother can go together with this token. No one will dare to stop you." The little girl took the token and carefully put it away. After doing this, Lin Yu and the others were ready to leave. The little girl and her mother watched Lin Yu and the others leave and disappear into the horizon. "One day, can I still see Big Brother and Big Sister?" The little girl looked at Tian, Quebec. "In the future, little Xian is also a cultivator. As long as you work hard, you will definitely see it. At that time, you must be grateful to the immortals," the little girl's mother said. They had yet to realize that the Forgotten Immortal sect was a place that many people dreamed of joining, and it was a sect that they wanted to join. Until Lin Yu and the others left for a long time. Only then did the Red Cloud sect's grand elders dare to stand up. They knelt on the deck of the ship for an entire night. Some of the disciples even fainted, but they were still firmly fixed in place by the grand elder. It seems that it's time to clean up the sect. If this continues, one day it will lead to a disaster. The Red Cloud sect's great elder slowly got up. He led the Red Cloud sect people to the front of the city gate. The little girl and her mother have been waiting here all this time. Have the little sacred king and the others already left? The Red Cloud Grand Elder looked at the mother and daughter pair and asked indifferently. Seeing that they were from the Red Cloud sect, the mother and daughter became timid. The immortals have already left for a long time, the little girl's mother replied. This child seems to be the one who follows the young holy king. Old Ghost Tong narrowed his eyes. Is that so? The Red Cloud Great Elder stepped forward and grabbed the little girl's arm. You're hurting me. The little girl felt wronged. Her arm was bleeding from a pinch. Senior Red Cloud sect, Xn, is just a child. If there's anything, just come at me. The little girl's mother was frightened and stepped forward to stop them. But the Red Cloud sect's Grand Elder's aura directly shook the little girl's mother several feet away. Mother! The little girl shouted. A force was emitted. What a strong root bone, it seems it's some kind of constitution. The Red Cloud Great Elder was surprised. His eyes were shining. Such a good seedling. It's better to enter the Red Cloud sect. The Red Cloud Great Elder's tone did not have the slightest hint of rejection. This is definitely an immortal seedling. The Red Cloud Great Elder had never seen such a high aptitude seedling in his life. This child is related to the young holy king. Maybe when the time comes, the Red Cloud sect will cultivate her. The Red Cloud Great Elder thought again. Now that the young holy king had returned, he certainly would not stay for too long. And this little girl and him were just strangers. She certainly would not care. My sect has a secret method that can transplant the root bone. Thinking of this, the Red Cloud Great Elder looked at the Red Cloud Great Elder. If the root bone was transplanted into her body, the Red Cloud sect would certainly soar in a few decades and become a first-class force. At this time, he was shocked by the little girl's root bone. His fear had been thrown to the back of his mind. I don't want to go to the Red Cloud sect. It's full of bad people. The little girl cried. She ran to her mother and helped her up. It's not up to you. The Red Cloud Great Elder stepped forward and grabbed the little girl. I want to go with my mother. You let me go. Bad people. The little girl wanted to break free, but she was so powerless. Exionara. The little girl's mother struggled to support her body, wanting to stop them, but she was hit by the power of the light curtain and flew back several feet, coughing up blood from the corner of her mouth. The people around the city gate couldn't bear to see this. An old man coughed. This mother and daughter are really bitter. It's not easy to survive, but now they are being targeted by the Red Cloud sect. At this time, the Forgotten Immortal sect's ancient token in the little girl's arms emitted a soft light. It directly shook the Red Cloud Great Elder. His body was tattered. Many places were pierced. Then the soft light beam soared into the sky. The clouds in the sky were scattered, reflecting a hazy immortal light. In the Forgotten Immortal sect in the Far East, someone suddenly opened his eyes. Who used the Forgotten Immortal ancient token? His figure jumped, with his hands behind his back, and directly stepped into the transmission array. A heavenly sword nailed down from the sky, directly smashing the city's city wall into pieces. A figure walked out from the sky. The current elder of the Forgotten Immortal sect has come personally. The sound of people inhaling cold air was heard. The Red Cloud Great Elder coughed up blood at this time. Already seriously injured, his breath was very weak. Old Ghost Tong trembled on the side. The Red Cloud Great Elder had now trapped him miserably, not to mention kneeling for a night for no reason. Now he provoked the Forgotten Immortal sect. Who used the ancient token? The refined man stepped forward. The people present trembled. This breath was too terrifying. With the strength of the Forgotten Immortal sect, even if Qin-Ji left, but with the things left behind by Lin Yu, its development was beyond imagination. It's the little holy king's thing. Who are you? The refined man looked at the little girl with tears in her eyes. This is the token that Big Brother gave me to go to the Forgotten Immortal sect with my mother. The little girl looked at the man in front of her and said carefully, The refined man saw what was going on. The little holy king has been here. The refined man looked at old ghost Tong Yu and questioned. The strongest person in this area now, facing the elder of the forgotten immortal sect, did not have the slightest temper. At this time, could only answer submissively. The little holy king has indeed been here, but he left a few hours ago. Now I don't know where he went. The refined man looked at the red cloud great elder, his eyes slightly cold. Knowing the relationship between the little holy king and this girl, you still dare to touch him. The refined man did not say much. Before the red cloud great elder could beg for mercy, the sword light flashed and directly cut him in half. Blood dripped, making everyone terrified. The refined man's attack was extremely fierce. I'll take you and your mother to the forgotten immortal sect. He came to the little girl, squatted down, with a smile on his face. This was the person who was chosen by the little holy king. He had to do his best to cultivate her. Thank you, uncle. The little girl still had a lingering fear and had not recovered from a fear. As the man took the little girl and her mother and disappeared, old ghost Tong Yu breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he did not make a move. Otherwise, he would be like his old friend now, seeing the king of hell, until a long time after they left. The people in the city were all envious. The little girl and her mother from now on were in a different world from them. Chapter 11:03. Lin Yu and the others traveled east and soon arrived at the easternmost part of the Hongmeng continent. At the edge of the Hongmeng continent was a boundless ocean that stretched as far as the eye could see. Lin Yu and the others stood on the shore, their clothes fluttering in the wind. This was the forbidden area of the Hongmeng continent. Bones were everywhere on the beach, riddled with holes and decayed beyond recognition. There were small creatures crawling inside. The aura here was very oppressive and strange. It was a forbidden area since birth. Those who barged into this place had all died in the end. According to legend, a large number of bones here were from a great force tens of thousands of years ago. In order to find the truth and divine items, they attacked this place. In the end, they were all annihilated, leaving only bones everywhere. The dark divine priest and the others frowned. The aura here made them feel a little oppressive under the saint realm, although it didn't cause much of an impact. The Hongmeng continent's strength was low. It was only a drop in the ocean compared to the 3 realms and 5 regions. However, there was a place that could affect saint realm experts hidden here. They couldn't help but be a little surprised. Lin Yu stood in front with his eyes closed. The origin material in his body was circulating. He was sensing if this material existed here. The 12 universes had been born for countless years. It was probably very difficult to find this material now. In the end, Lin Yu made a decision and prepared to cross this sea. A magical boat appeared. They got on the boat and moved with the oars. Lin Yu and the others headed toward the front of the sea. Not long after, they disappeared above the sea. The sea was very calm, with a sense of death. However, the dark divine priest and the others had a bad premonition in their hearts. After a few hours of traveling, they didn't know how far they had traveled. As for the seawater here, it gradually began to turn dark. A fishy smell filled the air. What's in front? The Lord of the Realm Sea's gaze stopped not far away. There was a black shadow in front of them. It was huge and boundless. It was like a towering mountain range floating in the sea. The aura here was already able to affect Saint Realm experts and suppress their perception. As they got closer, the true appearance of the mountain range was revealed. It was the corpse of a giant. Its face was sinister, and half of its head was already shattered. This was also a fatal injury, and it was unknown what kind of artifact killed it. From the remaining half of its head, one could vaguely see that the giant looked very ferocious, with a green face and fangs, like an evil spirit. At the same time, there were many huge wounds on his body. He was wearing clothes made of beast skin and had a desolate aura about him. I'm afraid this corpse was already at the Emperor realm when he was alive. I wonder who killed him. The dark priest frowned. The overall strength of the Hongmeng continent was very low, but the corpse of an Emperor Realm cultivator had appeared here. It looked very ancient. It was unknown which era it came from. Lin Yu had reincarnated for 100,000 years. Although he knew of this forbidden ground, due to his low cultivation level, he had never ventured in. Although he was surprised to see such a scene inside, he wasn't too surprised. If there really was such a substance in the depths of this place, everything would make sense. They continued to move forward. The seawater here had already become pitch black like ink, giving off a soul-stirring feeling. The blue sky and white clouds were replaced by a gloomy sky. A few more corpses appeared, floating in the air. Was this place once a battlefield? The Lord of the Realm, Sea, was shocked. They had seen no less than 10 corpses by now, and they all seemed to be from a mysterious race. They were all powerful and were all in the Emperor Realm. If there really was a great battle here, and so many Emperor Realm cultivators participated in it, it would undoubtedly be a major event in ancient history. Why wasn't it passed down? This was a suspicious point. Moreover, this place seemed to be in the periphery, and the corpses that appeared were all in the Emperor Realm. If they went deeper, they might even encounter the corpses of Saint Realm cultivators. The death of a creature of this level would cause the world to tremble. Moreover, these corpses seem to be of the same race. They don't look like monsters or humans. The Lord of the Realm, Sea, analyzed. The Dark Priest and the others also shook their heads. Even with their experience, they didn't recognize this kind of creature. It seemed to have never appeared in ancient history. Could it be an illusion? The Archaeosaurus frowned. At the same time, his jade horn emitted a dense light that illuminated all illusions. However, it turned out that these were all real and not reflections of the sea. Let's continue forward. Lin Yu stood at the bow of the ship. He was also somewhat interested in this place. Perhaps the answer would appear ahead. Everyone nodded. 4 saints and 2 emperors. It was definitely an unimaginable force. In the 3 realms and 5 regions, it was enough to sweep through anything. Now that they were here, although they all had a bad feeling, it wasn't enough to pose a threat to their lives. As they moved forward, the unknown giants were left behind by the ship. After Lin Yu and the others disappeared in front of them, one of the corpses moved its broad fingers slightly, causing waves to appear on the surface of the sea. Even Lin Yu and the others didn't realize that the giant wasn't truly dead yet. It seemed to be sleeping in a different way. Now that Lin Yu and the others had barged in, it was showing signs of waking up. Who knew how many more of these creatures there were ahead? If they fully recovered, it would be quite troublesome for Lin Yu and the others. 3 days passed. Lin Yu and the others had been searching for the direction and heading east. It was deathly silent and very oppressive. However, for experts like them who had cultivated for many years, 3 days was nothing. Lin Yu opened his eyes at this moment. A wisp of light shone in his deep eyes. I can feel the fluctuation of that substance. He looked in a direction. The fluctuation was very weak and almost disappeared in the blink of an eye. However, it didn't escape Lin Yu's perception. He had more or less locked onto the direction. It was still ahead. The Dark Priest and the others were somewhat excited. If they really found that substance, Lin Yu had the ability to fight against the 6-winged Divine King before he obtained the King of God's badge. This substance opposed the strange power that the 6-winged Divine King possessed. It might be of great use in the upcoming battle. Lin Yu knew this very well. He had a deep understanding of that strange power. It seemed to have some sort of polluting attribute. If he hadn't used the King of God's badge to sense that origin substance, it might have left unimaginable hidden dangers in his body. Lin Yu didn't know how the 6-winged Divine King obtained that power. However, he could roughly guess that the strange power could absorb the essence and life force of all living beings. It would then nourish itself. The time of the 6-winged Divine King's breakthrough was approaching. When that time came, the entire 3 realms and 5 regions would probably be wiped out. Lin Yu definitely had to stop it. And now, he had to find that origin substance. The boat sped up. Lin Yu had already memorized the general direction. However, at this moment, something strange happened. Waves swept out, covering the sky and the sun. The waves seemed to reach the height of the heavens. Sitting on top of the waves was a set of white bones. It was huge and seemed to be of the same race as the giants. However, its body had already decayed and only bones were left. Chapter 1104. The skeleton held a huge axe that was covered in cracks and emitted a terrifying aura. It sat on the throne at the top of the waves. Its cultivation was undoubtedly in the saint realm. Is it finally here? Lin Yu and the others weren't surprised by the appearance of the saint realm. It was just that this form made them somewhat surprised. After reaching the saint realm, one's body would be immortal and could coexist with heaven and earth. However, the skeleton's body had obviously decayed and only its bones were left. Even so, it still retained the cultivation of the saint realm. I wonder if this skeleton was in the saint realm when it was alive, or if it was nurtured in the sea after it died. The Archaeosaurs were curious. There were only a handful of saints in the entire 3 realms and 5 regions. All of them were existences that could suppress a realm. However, this sea in the Hongming continent had given birth to such an existence. Only Lin Yu's eyes were deep as he looked at the skeleton thoughtfully. That origin substance is definitely here. Lin Yu was certain. The skeleton might have been in a high realm when it was alive, but it hadn't reached the saint realm, because some impurities in the body would be removed when one reached the saint realm, and there were faint traces of impurities on the skeleton. In that case, there was only one possibility. The skeleton had gained intelligence after it died, and then it broke through to the saint realm. And the thing that contained this kind of power was definitely that kind of origin material. Captured alive. There might be secrets in its body. Lin Yu stood at the bow of the ship. The seawater was rolling up, and the whole ship was shaking, showing signs of instability. Lin Yu didn't move. He didn't show any fear in the face of the saint realm. His body emitted a hazy aura, and the seawater didn't touch him. The dark priest nodded. The Archaeosaurs, the sea god dragon, and the dark priest attacked at the same time. Now that they were in an unknown place, they had to avoid accidents every time they attacked. Even if the saint realm aura from the skeleton wasn't pure, it had just crossed the threshold. However, the dark priest and the other 2 weren't careless. Roar! The sea god dragon roared, and the dragon's roar resounded through the clouds. It had materialized and spread far and wide. He grew up in the realm sea, the highest existence of the water realm. At this moment, the surging seawater calmed down. The huge waves suddenly fell, and the wind also stopped. The jade horn of the Archaeosaurs glowed, directly imprisoning the skeleton. In the end, the divine priest of darkness waved his sleeve and reached out his hand. He grabbed the skeleton as if he was grabbing a chick. Its mountain-like body was shrinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. No matter how hard he struggled, he couldn't do anything. With the 3 saints of the dark divine priest taking action, who would be able to stir up a storm? The skeleton was howling. He was the ruler of this body of water. How could he allow himself to be humiliated like this? Right now, he was frantically struggling. The skeleton released a flawless power, trying to break free from the shackles. But it was all in vain. In the end, the skeleton was suppressed and shrunk to the size of an ordinary person. In its eye sockets, there were 2 glossy green will-o'-the wisps emitting a strange aura. When they looked at each other, they would feel as if they were in an ice cellar. Lin Yu stepped forward and placed his right palm on top of the skeleton's head. The power of the King of God's badge was released. At this moment, the ferocious and murderous skeleton sensed the power of the King of God's badge. At this moment, it trembled and didn't dare to move at all. However, Lin Yu didn't frown. I just searched its consciousness. It seems to have retained only its primitive instincts. It doesn't have any other memories. Lin Yu originally wanted to use the skeleton to search its memories and find the existence of the origin substance. But now, it seemed that this method wouldn't work. As a saint, it didn't even have extraordinary intelligence. The Archaeosaurs looked at the skeleton with disdain. As expected, those in the sea are all a little silly. What did you say? The sea god dragon naturally knew that the Archaeosaurus was mocking him. "Sorry, I forgot that you're also from the sea." The Archaeosaurus smiled without any sense of apology. Seeing that the two were about to fight again, the divine priest of darkness hurriedly stopped them. After all, the most important thing to come to this part of the sea was to find the thing that Lin Yu said. "Be careful, or I'll press you to the bottom of the sea god dragon threatened. "I'm so scared," the Archaeosaurus replied. The war of words between the two was temporarily put aside. They all went forward and examined the skeleton. However, they all frowned. This skeleton had cultivation, but its intelligence was extremely low. Its eyes were only filled with negative thoughts like killing. Moreover, Lin Yu and the others had never seen such a creature, nor had they been born into any force. Everything was unknown. This race had so many emperors and saints. How great was the force when they were born? Perhaps no one in the 3 realms and 5 regions could resist them. Perhaps because of the passage of time, this race has been forgotten by the world. Or perhaps that part of their history has been completely erased for some unknown reason. After all, what Lin Yu and the others saw was only the tip of the iceberg. There were still many corpses of this race floating on the sea. At this moment, Lin Yu and the others also sensed it. The corpses on the sea seemed to show signs of revival. "Let's leave this place." In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, Lin Yu steered the ship and disappeared from the sea. He caught a whiff of the aura of the white origin from the skeleton, and this feeling also started to become clearer. With the help of the skeleton, Lin Yu and the others were getting closer and closer to the origin substance. 2 hours passed. The Archaeosaurus sat in front of the skeleton and pondered slowly. "This thing has only gained initial intelligence. I think we can use it. It's not a bad idea to infuse it with the divine sense lotus and treat it as a puppet." The sea god dragon was somewhat disdainful. "That's all you have." However, as he spoke, he inadvertently glanced at the skeleton. Obviously, he was also tempted after hearing the Archaeosaurus' words. It was a Saint Realm puppet, after all. The skeleton's intelligence was not high. The 2 balls of fire in its eye sockets were its divine sense. For people like the Archaeosaurus who had entered the Saint Realm for a long time, they naturally knew many methods in this field. It was not too mysterious to control it. "I'm warning you. Stay 3 feet away from me." The Archaeosaurus was not in a good mood. He cast a sidelong glance at the sea god dragon. The sea god dragon gave the Lord of the Realm Sea a look. Realm Sea Lord naturally saw the general meaning and quickly understood the meaning in his eyes. However, the Lord of the Realm Sea was covered in cold sweat. He wanted to get involved for no reason. More importantly, he had to face the Archaeosaurus and the sea god dragon. It would not be good to offend either of them. The Lord of the Realm Sea's scalp went numb. There should be more of these Saint Realm skeletons later. Why don't we suppress them first and then discuss who they belong to later? After saying this, the Archaeosaurus and the Lord of the Realm Sea both nodded in agreement. Chapter 1105. The black fog here was getting thicker and thicker, and it was almost impossible to disperse. It emitted an aura that made people despair. All light disappeared, and the obsidian aura no longer existed. It was as if they had come to the end of the world, and nothing should appear here. At this moment, Lin Yu frowned slightly. The black substance that filled the world gave people a very oppressive feeling, and Lin Yu could sense this aura most clearly. It came from the same source as the strange power that the 6-winged divine king had. Although it was not dense now, it appeared clearly. It seemed to be able to devour, pollute, and assimilate all substances, and the obsidian aura here was almost imperceptible. Obsidian aura was the most basic energy substance in the world, but it disappeared here, devoured by this strange black substance. This caused everyone to be a little surprised. If they encountered the source of this strange substance, they might be doomed even if they were in the Saint Realm. At this moment, the spiritual ship had arrived at the periphery of the area with the densest concentration of the strange substance. Black gas filled the sky, rolling above the sea, and spewing out a power of pollution. They could see 5 wooden coffins in front of them. They seemed to have existed before the birth of the world and were extremely ancient. Mysterious patterns were engraved on them, which involved the origin of cultivation. Archaeosaurus and the others could not comprehend it in a short time. And with the arrival of Lin Yu and the others, the coffins trembled and creaked, becoming the only sound in this area. It was breathtaking. It was unknown what era the people buried in the coffins were from, but just the aura they emitted was terrifying. The Lord of the Realm, C, felt a chill down his spine. The coffins gave him a feeling that was too transcendent. If the creatures buried in them were to be born, they would definitely be invincible. Scarlet lightning struck down from the sky. It struck the coffins, and red stars surged, illuminating the entire area. Get ready, the big one is coming. The Dark Priest stepped forward, and his Saint Realm aura was released, protecting Lin Yu and the Lord of the Realm C behind him. The aura emitted from the 5 coffins definitely belonged to the Saint Realm. It was not something the skeletons could compare to. It was extremely condensed. Even the Archaeosaurus and the others vaguely felt threatened. I could already feel it. That substance seems to be behind this strange black fog. Lin Yu looked ahead indifferently. His clothes were already fluttering in the wind, and he stood perfectly straight. Can you stall the creatures in these 5 coffins? Lin Yu made his decision. He was prepared to enter this strange black fog alone. Among those present, he was the only one who understood this substance the best and could resist this decaying gas. Little Divine King, is this okay? Asked the Dark Divine Priest, looking ahead. However, when he turned his head and saw Lin Yu's calm expression, he nodded. No problem. Young Divine Kings can enter. Just leave these 5 coffins to us. Archaeosaurus and the others all exuded the aura of the Saint Realm. They hadn't even started fighting yet, but the heavens and earth had already changed. At this moment, the Jade Pure Divine Maiden also stood out. Her beauty was unparalleled, and her long black hair danced along with her aura like a waterfall. In the past few days, Lin Yu had used the power of the Divine King's order to heal her. Her injuries had almost completely healed, and her strength had mostly recovered. Although she hadn't reached her peak, it was enough to stall for some time. They burned like an eternal furnace, exuding boundless holy light, completely illuminating the area. Don't let yourself be exhausted. Lin Yu reminded them. There was no glory chi here, and it was difficult to replenish it. They didn't bring much this time. Although the glory bot could replenish one's body, every sage needed a huge amount of energy. They couldn't hold on for long. Bang! The coffin lid exploded. Then a pitch-black arm covered in strange runes stretched out. Then 5 humanoid monsters with disheveled hair appeared above the sea, roaring. Scarlet lightning flooded the area. Creatures that were neither human nor ghost walked out of the scarlet sea of lightning in all shapes and sizes. They were roaring like demonic voices, rubbing against the ears of Lin Yu and the others. Sea God Dragon's expression was solemn. He handed a transparent pill to Realm Sea Lord. This can give you the power of a saint for a short time. Can you resist one of them? Realm Sea Lord was a little excited, and his eyes shone. This was a part of his cultivation that Sea God Dragon had condensed over the years in case of an emergency. He had no choice but to take it out now. Realm Sea Lord knew that the situation was urgent, and he couldn't afford to hesitate. He knew that this was the power of a saint for a short time. It was definitely a priceless treasure, enough to make all living beings jealous. In fact, only Realm Sea Lord, who came out of the Realm Sea with Sea God Dragon, was qualified to grasp this power. It involved the comprehension of the Saint Realm, and the benefits were enormous. As Realm Sea Lord swallowed the pill, a vast power swept across the heavens and earth. Realm Sea Lord's black hair danced in the wind, and he was in high spirits, looking down on the world. Although his cultivation wasn't stable, and his power was a little mottled and superficial, this was the true power of a saint. Lin Yu nodded at them. Young Divine King, don't worry. Leave this to us. Archaeosaurus rubbed his palms, and his eyes were very calm. He was looking forward to the battle between the saints. "Your Highness, be careful." The jade-pure goddess held the zither, and clear light poured down, making it bright and flawless. Lin nodded. The power of the divine king order enveloped him. Then he jumped off the spiritual ship and walked toward the black mist. The 5 strange creatures wanted to stop him, and they reached out their sharp claws, covering the sky as if they could crush the stars. "Your opponent is here." The dark divine priest punched out, and the strange creatures were pushed back. Then, he took the initiative to attack and began to fight with the strange creature in the lead. At the same time, Archaeosaurus and the others also attacked. The battle between the saints turned the sky dark. As the saint light flashed, even the sky seemed to be pierced through. The black seawater was evaporated temporarily, and it was difficult to replenish, forming a vacuum zone. The Lord of the Realm Sea laughed in the sky. He fought back and forth with a bizarre being that was holding a bone club. He was the Lord of the Realm Sea, and his control of water had reached the level of perfection. As he waved his sleeve, the seawater rolled and formed a large halberd in his hand. As it slid, it directly isolated the seawater, forming cracks that were difficult to repair like an abyss. The sea god dragon nodded. The Lord of the Realm Sea's talent was unquestionable, and he had been in the Emperor realm for many years. Now that he had obtained the power of the Saint realm, he quickly grasped it and waved it naturally. If the Lord of the Realm Sea was given time and opportunity, he might be able to break through to the Saint realm. At this moment, Lin Yu had already walked under the black mist. In the black mist, runes intertwined like evil dragons, rolling and stirring. Lin Yu looked very inconspicuous under the black mist, like a grain of sand in the sea, extremely small. But he didn't hesitate at all. Under the power of the Divine King Order, the white origin substance on his body also emitted a mysterious power to protect his body. He took a step forward, and without hesitation, he disappeared into the black mist. As soon as he stepped in, the scene here suddenly changed. The battle outside had disappeared, and he couldn't see or hear it. It was dead silent, and only the black mist above was rolling. There seemed to be no concept of time and space here. This was very similar to the place where Lin Yu's divine sense passed by when he wanted to analyze the strange runes with the help of the Divine King Order. "It should be here." Lin Yu made a judgment. Chapter 1106. He watched as the white origin substance in his body turned into smoke and drifted forward. Although it was constantly being destroyed by the strange black substance, it still acted as a guide. Lin Yu could continue forward in this direction. The strange black substance and the white origin substance were mutually reinforcing and counteracting. The white origin substance represented new life, while the strange black substance represented destruction. It carried an extremely evil aura and could be called the abominable origin. If one wanted to control this substance, they would have to pay a certain price. Lin Yu thought of the people behind the 6-winged divine king from other universes. Perhaps they had made some kind of secret deal. Otherwise, the 6-winged divine king would never know about the existence of the abominable origin. Moreover, he could use this substance to advance his cultivation by leaps and bounds and touch the threshold of the Saint King realm. An aura of despair filled this space. Do you want to control the power of heaven and earth? As long as you comprehend and master the abominable origin, no one will be able to threaten you. Come, let us overlook the ages together and trample the 12 universes beneath our feet. What 6-winged divine king? He will only be your stepping stone. An invisible voice kept tempting Lin Yu to absorb this strange substance into his body and enter the saint realm, surpassing the 6-winged divine king. This voice was too strange and could affect one's heart. It was as if the person in his heart was speaking to him. If it were any other Emperor Realm cultivator, their Tao heart would have collapsed, and they would have fallen into depravity and become the host of the abominable origin. However, Lin Yu was unmoved. 100,000 years of reincarnation had long made his Tao heart indestructible. No external object could affect him. "You can't hurt me. Know your place," Lin Yu said coldly. The abominable origin here had already given birth to sentience. Almost no one could resist this temptation. Lin Yu knew that if this abominable origin could touch him, it would have been obliterated long before entering. The abominable origin was rioting. "You can't withstand it. Impossible. When you entered, I felt your desire for power that surpasses everything. Why won't you accept it?" An ancient and evil voice sounded. Lin Yu shook his head. "I do desire power, but you don't deserve to be under my control." What a joke. I was born at the beginning of the 12 universes. I can make people enter the supreme realm, even surpassing the divine king realm. Quickly throw me in. The more you speak like this, the more panicked you become. You are afraid that I will find an origin substance that can oppose you. Lin Yu was laughing coldly. His expression was calm as he continued to walk forward without stopping. "That substance has long since been devoured by me. It will be difficult to find it again in this world. You're courting death by doing this." The essence of utmost evilness spoke again, trying to get Lin Yu to give up. However, he only received a one-word reply. Scram. If Lin Yu had comprehended the abominable origin, then even if he had defeated the six-winged God King, he would have had to walk the path of sacrificing the 3 realms and 5 realms. This way, what was the difference between him and the six-winged Divine King? "Haha, you desire power but refuse to accept me. You're destined to not go far." The voice of the abominable origin disappeared. Lin Yu was expressionless as he continued to search for the aura and continued to move forward. At the same time, the aura of the Divine King's token became even more intense. He was guarding against the abominable origin's sudden counterattack. As expected, when Lin Yu deliberately lowered the aura of the Divine King's token, the black fog that filled the sky turned into ferocious, ghostly figures that charged toward Lin Yu. The black fog condensed into a palm that suddenly pressed down on Lin Yu. Even the outside world could see the huge palm print that exuded an aura of annihilation. Even the Dark Priest and the others vaguely felt threatened. "Young Divine King, please don't let anything happen to you." The Dark Priest looked worried. The Archaeosaurus was also screaming. He was attacking with all his might, wanting to suppress this creature and refine it into his own puppet to increase his protection in the upcoming battle. However, as the black fog raged, the living being that walked out of the coffin had once again grown stronger. The Realm Sea Lord was hit and retreated, coughing up blood from the corner of his mouth. "What's going on?" They looked at the depths of the black fog at the same time. Then, their expressions changed drastically. The giant palm print seemed to be holding up an entire realm. Countless dead spirits roared, filled with an aura of annihilation. The Archaeosaurus and the others felt their scalps go numb. They knew that even if they didn't die from this attack, they would very likely be seriously injured. Lin Yu was only an Emperor Realm cultivator. How could he guarantee that his body and soul wouldn't be destroyed by this attack? "His Highness will be fine," the Jade Pure Goddess said calmly. Then, the melodious sound of the zither turned into divine gold chains that completely trapped the rampaging creature in the coffin. The 9 Heavens Tribulation Transcendent song was played again, producing all kinds of strange phenomena. It seemed like primordial stars were constantly exploding in the sky, turning into dust and dissipating. The Archaeosaurus and the others nodded. After experiencing so many things, they all knew that with Lin Yu's personality, he wouldn't do something he wasn't confident in. Believe in the young Divine King. Heaven helps the worthy, and he will be fine. The Divine Sea Dragon's grand voice sounded. He turned to the Realm Sea Lord who was coughing up blood. "Hold on a little longer. I will suppress this ghost." After all, the Realm Sea Lord wasn't a true saint. Now, facing the rampaging creature in the coffin, he was already showing signs of weakness. The Realm Sea Lord nodded. His aura grew stronger again as he circulated his cultivation base. He waved his halberd, tearing the sky apart. Boom! A terrifying collision occurred. The Realm Sea Lord flew backward, coughing up blood again and again. His body was somewhat tattered. The rampaging creature in the coffin was too terrifying. It was about to be annihilated, tearing the Realm Sea Lord apart. Its claw reached out and enveloped the Realm Sea Lord in an instant. The Jade Pure Goddess plucked the zither strings. Several illusory divine gold chains rushed out from the zither sounds, directly rushing out, piercing through the creature in the coffin that caught up to Realm Sea Lord, and then they wrapped around his body. The creature in the coffin was nailed to the void. The divine gold chains carried an immortal aura, as if nothing could destroy them. The Realm Sea Lord propped himself up and bowed to the Jade Pure Goddess. Thank you for saving my life. However, he didn't hesitate at all. He adjusted his aura and waved his broken halberd, cleaving the creature in the coffin in half. Black blood dripped. The creature in the coffin roared, unable to recover in a short period of time. The Realm Sea Lord was also exhausted. He sat cross-legged in the void and began to recover from his injuries. Within the black mist, Lin Yu's lips curled up in the face of the abominable Origin's attack. The power of the Divine King's order blazed once more. Like a space-time divine sword, it pierced through the sky and stood in the eternal land. The black palm was instantly pierced through. Even the corporeal ghosts that had been summoned to attack Lin Yu were all destroyed in an instant. Lin Yu stood tall under the aura of the Divine King's order. His expression didn't change in the slightest. The abominable Origin was shocked. He didn't expect Lin Yu to have such a trick up his sleeve, and the reason he deliberately revealed an opening was to wait for him. At this time, he noticed Lin Yu. This aura, what is your relationship with that old man from back then? The person he was talking about was the old Divine King. It seems that you were chased and suppressed here by my royal father. Lin Yu wasn't surprised at all. Before he entered, the Divine King's order in his body had already sensed the old Divine King's remnant aura. The abominable Origin no longer spoke. The aura that locked onto Lin Yu was fading away. This kind of substance didn't have a host to rely on. It was very difficult for it to display its terrifying strength. This was not the slightest bit different from Lin Yu's guess. Chapter 1107. However, if Lin Yu wanted to completely erase this substance, it would be difficult for him to do so with his current cultivation and strength. After all, the old Divine King only managed to seal it when he was at his peak. The only possibility was that this substance was difficult to erase, or that it had some kind of effect on the 12 universes. Lin Yu did not pursue the matter any further as the abominable Origin stopped moving. However, he did not let down his guard. He did not know how far he had traveled. Lin Yu closed his eyes. The Origin's substance in his body was becoming thinner and thinner, like an incense stick that was about to burn out. It was no longer enough to illuminate the path ahead. Lin Yu sped up. However, he frowned slightly when he reached the back, because the abominable Origin here was not thinning. On the contrary, it was becoming more and more prosperous. It had almost become solid, dripping down from the void like a viscous liquid. Lin Yu felt his cultivation becoming sluggish. The abominable Origin counterattacked again. Lin Yu sat cross-legged on the ground. The Divine King's order emitted a gentle light that resisted the abominable Origin. Lin Yu was pondering. He had been guided here by the Origin's substance, but why was it replaced by the abominable Origin now? As I said, only by becoming one with me can you prove your Tao. The abominable Origin's hoarse voice sounded again. Lin Yu remained unmoved. Then he opened his eyes. There was a look of enlightenment in his eyes. He did not hesitate at all and took a step forward. He entered the viscous lake condensed by the abominable Origin. Ha ha! You will eventually fall into darkness. The abominable Origin laughed wantonly. Before the old Divine King came here, it had already devoured the Origin's substance and turned it into a part of itself. Now, only the abominable Origin remained in the 12 universes. Lin Yu, who had sunk into the lake of black runes, was under tremendous pressure. Millions of years had passed. Although the abominable origin had been sealed, it had grown to an unimaginable level. If not for the Divine King's order's protection, Lin Yu might not even have been able to step into the black mist. However, although the abominable origin source was smiling, its tone was a little unnatural. The violent, abominable origin matter began to surge violently, especially the Great Lake. It kept bubbling outwards, and there were remnants of planets on it that had already decayed beyond recognition. Lin Yu was inside and was under immense pressure. Although he had the God King's medallion to protect him, even the slightest bit of power that leaked into his body was too much for his body to handle. Ignoring the blood flowing from the corner of his mouth, Lin Yu smirked. Just as I thought. These two substances had always been mutually reinforcing and restraining each other. If the abominable origin still existed, then the origin matter would not disappear. Perhaps the real reason was, as the origin of extreme evil had said, he had devoured the origin substance, but he couldn't really digest it. Right now, it was being suppressed at the place where the source of abomination was the densest, which was the deepest part of the lake. As Lin Yu ventured deeper, the attacks from the abyssal origin grew more frequent and terrifying. It could no longer care about the God King's medallion and the seal that the old God King had placed in his body. The abyssal origin only had one thought now, and that was to stop Lin Yu from obtaining the origin substance. If he really obtained its power, it would be in a very bad situation. Although the abyssal origin source could sense the aura of other abyssal origins in the 12 universes, it was now sealed and could not communicate with the outside world. The abyssal origin source could infinitely magnify one's greed. It had entered Lin Yu's mind earlier, but didn't know that the person who controlled the abyssal origin source was the six-winged God King. As he ventured deeper, Lin Yu could already sense the pure power of the origin substance. Lin Yu wasn't the least bit surprised by this. It was just that the attacks were becoming more and more violent. The abyssal origin source was attacking wildly, as if it didn't care about its own life. It didn't hesitate to use up millions of origin substances that it had accumulated to stop Lin Yu. But all this was useless against Lin Yu, who had the God King's medallion. It couldn't cause any fatal damage to him. The 8 divisions of the Great Void operated outside his body. Azura's phantom raised its hands and protected Lin Yu in its palms. No, the bloodline of the God King, you can't enter there. The abyssal origin source roared wildly. It felt powerless. Lin Yu's temperament was too firm. He was completely unaffected by its bewitchment and was always clear-headed. Moreover, his wisdom was also unparalleled. From the abyssal origin source's words, he quickly guessed the clues. He came to the place where the origin substance was suppressed. A white light source appeared in front of him. Lin Yu had now descended a distance of 3,000 feet. The rich abyssal origin source gradually faded and was replaced by a bright power. As Lin Yu continued to dive, the light source below gradually grew larger. It seemed to have become a pure land isolated from the world. There were flowers, birds, insects, and trees, lush and thriving. The white light was pure and holy. Under its illumination, it could wash away the impurities in one's heart. The abyssal origin source was powerless and furious. Its voice gradually disappeared. This was no longer a place it could affect. Lin Yu descended. The origin substance here was very rich, forming a pure land. Looking into the distance, there was a towering mountain in front of him that stood at the end of the horizon. Young God King, you've come. At this time, a clear voice sounded. At some unknown time, the figure of a young child appeared in front of Lin Yu. His black hair was scattered and he looked strong. He wore a wide, ancient blue Taoist robe that was spotless. His eyes were even purer, making one feel comfortable looking at him. You know me? Lin Yu didn't show any surprise. Instead, he looked at the little boy with a questioning look. The youngest son of the old God King, Lin Yu. I've been waiting here for you for a long time. The little boy smiled. Lin Yu looked at the boy and fell in a deep thought. The boy's appearance was somewhat familiar. Lin Yu began to search through the ancient texts he'd read before. You're the holy son of Gushu from the primordial continent that attacked this place tens of thousands of years ago. Lin Yu looked at the boy. Tens of thousands of years had passed, but the boy still looked the same as in the portrait. However, his appearance had grown clearer and carried an extraordinary aura. That's a title from a long time ago. Now that the faction has been destroyed, I'm naturally not the holy son of Gushu. Young God King, you may call me Gushu. It was hard to imagine that someone from the primordial continent had survived the attack and even made it deep into this place. Come to think of it, this might be a trick left behind by the old God King to keep this person alive. Perhaps there were other arrangements. And the little boy's words also confirmed this point. The old God King divined that you would come here one day, so he ordered me to wait here. Gushu spoke slowly. He'd reached a level where he didn't care about material gains or personal sorrow. His cultivation was even more profound. In tens of thousands of years, he'd reached the Emperor realm. Lin Yu followed Gushu through the lush ancient forest. Spring water gurgled from the gaps. With Gushu leading the way, the two of them seemed to be walking very slowly. Even the scenery around them seemed to be slowly moving backward. However, in less than 10 steps, Lin Yu and the others arrived at the foot of a towering mountain. Only when they reached the foot of the mountain did they realize how tall it was. The towering mountain seemed to have been cut off by someone, leaving only the bottom. It was this bottom that formed the mountain. Lin Yu seemed to sense something, and his heart gradually grew heavy. Gushu, holy son, pointed at a narrow path. This is the path up the mountain. What the young divine king wants is on it. The path was paved with old bluestone slabs, so the ground was damp. Since no one had set foot on it for a long time, moss had grown all over it, and many were densely covered in cracks. Chapter 1108. Lin Yu looked up at the sky. White clouds floated in the sky, and the thick origin matter was so thick that it could not be dissolved. However, at the same time, there was another aura that made one feel magnanimous. It was as if one was facing a universe that could contain all things. Lin Yu heaved a sigh of relief. He bowed with every step and slowly walked up. The ancient Shu saint stood respectfully at the foot of the mountain, watching as Lin Yu walked up step by step. A few hours passed, and the final step was taken. Lin Yu appeared at the peak of the mountain. This was a huge platform that was intertwined with origin matter. At the same time, a figure appeared in front of him. He stood there quietly with his hands behind his back and slowly turned around. His face was as sharp as a knife, and his eyebrows were sharp like swords. His snow-white hair draped over his shoulders. Upon closer inspection, this person's appearance was 70% similar to Lin Yu. However, he was much older, and his eyes were filled with endless vicissitudes. It was as if he had seen the changes in history and the passing of time. You're here. This person was none other than Lin Yu's father from his previous life, the old divine king. However, his figure was very faint. It was just a remnant of his will that was left in the world. The divine king, token in Lin Yu's body, trembled. Then, it rushed out of his body and circled around the old divine king. Father. Lin Yu's eyes revealed a rare, true emotion. He knelt on the ground and bowed deeply. He did not get up for a long time. He also knew that the old divine king had completely passed away. What appeared now was just a remnant of his will. He had existed until now to wait for Lin Yu's arrival. Father and son had finally met. However, they were separated forever. You have really grown up. The old divine king was very pleased. This remnant of mine will not exist for long. This origin matter is very mysterious. You need to study it well. The old divine king did not mention the six-winged divine king, even though he knew that the six-winged divine king had gone astray and colluded with other universes. However, he didn't say anything to make Lin Yu kill him no matter what. I'm very satisfied to be able to see you again before I disappear. The old god king smiled. Lin Yu walked forward and stood side by side with the old divine king. The sun rose and the moon set. 3 days passed. The old god king's figure grew dimmer and dimmer. The two of them were speechless but it was better than 1,000 words. It was such a peerless powerhouse who had dominated the 12 universes in the heavens and earth, who had used everything he had to face his own sun. When the sun rose the next day, the old God King completely disappeared. His tall and straight figure was engraved on the mountain peak. At this time, the God King token was boiling hot. This was the last thing the old God King had left behind for Lin Yu, a chance to use the strength of a half-step God King. Then, the origin matter on the mountain peak began to slowly converge toward Lin Yu. It seemed to recognize him as its master. Lin Yu did not deliberately control himself. Origin matter entered his body through every pore and pore on his body. At this time, Bai Xiaoli was also greedily absorbing the origin matter. Lin Yu's body and consciousness were being cleansed in all aspects. All the impurities were turned into filth and expelled from his body. Lin Yu stood with his eyes slightly closed. He did not control it, but the origin matter continued to enter his body until it reached a critical point. The God King token emitted a light, and time here accelerated. At the same time, Lin Yu's stagnant cultivation was also rapidly improving. For half a month, Lin Yu stood in the same place. In the end, as if the conditions were right, Lin Yu's cultivation broke through again and reached late-stage Emperor realm. His breakthrough created a gust of wind that blew away the white clouds, revealing the indigo blue sky. The sky was clean and pure. Lin Yu stood in the same place for 3 days. Finally, he looked at the sky and bowed deeply. "Father, I have important matters to attend to. I will take my leave first," Lin Yu said slowly. The origin matter was now in Lin Yu's body. Most of it had yet to be refined. In only 15 days, Lin Yu had broken through to late-stage Emperor realm. It was obvious how terrifying the origin matter was. As expected of a substance that existed before the universe was born, Lin Yu did not linger. He slowly turned around and glanced at the old God King, then descended the mountain peak. "Thank you, Taoist Gushu." Lin Yu arrived at the foot of the mountain. Half a month had passed, and Gushu had been waiting in the same place. Saint Sun Gushu humbly replied, "This is what I should do." After a few simple words, Lin Yu prepared to leave. He still didn't know how much time had passed in the outside world, or how the Archaeosaurs were doing. "Haven't you thought of going outside to take a look?" Lin Yu asked before he left. Gushu shook his head. "I was already dead. If the old God King hadn't saved me, I would have been a skeleton as well. After the destruction of the sect, I no longer have any lingering sentiments. But if you need me, young God King, one day, I will come find you." Gushu cupped his hands and bade farewell to Lin Yu. Lin Yu nodded and enveloped him once more with the power of the God King's seal. Though Lin Yu had taken the origin matter away, this was still within the seal left behind by the old God King. Therefore, after Lin Yu's departure, this place hadn't been flooded by the origin matter. The journey back was quick. The origin matter had fallen silent and didn't try to stop Lin Yu. Lin Yu's current strength wasn't enough to destroy the origin matter. Therefore, he didn't stop and pierce through the black mist with a single blow. Lin Yu slowly walked out of the passage he'd created. The people sitting on the spiritual ship opened their eyes at this moment. "Did you succeed, Your Highness?" The Dark Priest asked hopefully. Lin Yu nodded. "Congratulations, Your Highness." The Jade Pure Divine maiden stepped forward. She'd also sensed that Lin Yu's cultivation had advanced once again. He'd reached late Emperor realm. Now that he'd obtained the origin matter that opposed the origin matter, it wouldn't be long before he broke through to the Sage realm. The Archaeosaurs and the others also stepped forward to offer their congratulations. 5 coffins were sealed behind them. Clearly, the 5 coffin spirits had already been suppressed by them. They were still struggling inside, letting out waves of roars. "I think we can refine these creatures that are neither human nor ghost into puppets." The Archaeosaurs pointed at the coffins. Lin Yu nodded in agreement. "But the aura on these things is a bit troublesome," the Archaeosaurs continued. The origin matter was polluting. If they weren't careful, it could cause a disaster. Furthermore, the 6-winged God King possessed the abominable origin. It was possible that these puppets would turn against him in the end. That would be a joke. Lin Yu indicated that they didn't need to worry. He stepped forward. Origin matter emanated from his hand. It was incomparably pure, as if it could purify everything. The coffins shook violently. They seemed to be very afraid of this power. At the same time, the God King's order, which was also the system's space-time power, sped up the flow of time. Black mist evaporated and dissipated into the world. As time passed, the coffins gradually stopped moving. The creatures inside became obedient. Lin Yu withdrew his technique. The coffins no longer emitted that strange aura. After the strange origin was cleansed, the strength of the beings in the coffins decreased slightly. Only 2 of the stronger ones still retained the cultivation of the saint realm. The others had fallen to the half-step sage realm. However, this was enough. After the successful refinement, it would definitely be an unimaginable battle strength for Lin Yu and the others. In the end, these creatures were divided between the Archaeosaurus and the Sea God Dragon. The Master of the Realm Sea was also given a half-step sage realm coffin creature. This made him very happy. This wasn't as simple as increasing his strength. He could also use it to comprehend the power of the sage realm. This would undoubtedly broaden his future path. 2 of the sage realm coffins were obtained by the Archaeosaurus and the Sea God Dragon. The rest were given to Lin Yu, the Jade Pure Goddess, and the Dark Divine Priest. After that, they prepared to set off on their journey home. Lin Yu and the others didn't care about the giant corpse floating here. Because of the origin matter of abomination, the giant corpse had also fallen into a deep sleep. Moreover, they didn't know how many corpses there were. With Lin Yu's current strength, it would be difficult to completely eliminate them. I'll completely destroy this place when my strength increases, Lin Yu thought. Chapter 1109. The existence of the abominable origin source here had always been a hidden danger. Who knew what would happen? When Xiao Chun turned around and looked at this place, the black fog spread out in the sky. The black seawater stood there calmly, without any ripples. Lin Yu and the others followed the coordinates left behind and began their return journey. They didn't stop at the forgotten immortal sect, but headed straight for the secret place where the Great Solar Buddha was. Danger came. They learned from the Great Solar Buddha that the Heaven region had begun to attack the Realm Sea. They had completely declared war. Without the Sea Divine Dragon, the Realm Sea's Lord's Realm Sea was like an egg striking a rock. They couldn't even resist. The Sea Divine Dragon was furious. The Realm Sea's Lord's eyes turned cold. Considering the Heaven Alliance's existence and its relationship with the Sea Divine Dragon, Lin Yu couldn't ignore this matter. They didn't stop and headed straight for the Realm Sea. The atmosphere was very tense. Very few people spoke along the way. Everyone had a clear understanding of the 6-winged Divine King's current strength. Even if they worked together, they might not be able to gain any advantage. Their chances of victory were less than 10%. Lin Yu and the others had already made their decision. There was only one place that the 6-winged Divine King was wary of, and that was the primordial continent. The Great Solar Buddha was overseeing this place. The 6-winged Divine King was still wary and didn't dare to rashly invade. They passed through the passage and arrived at the Boundless Sea, one of the 7 seas of the Realm Sea. The seawater here was already dyed red with blood. There were floating corpses everywhere. The Realm Sea's Lord's expression was cold. After the Sage Realm cultivation entered his body, he had already comprehended and broken through to late-stage Emperor Realm. He was already considered one of the top existences in the 3 realms and 5 regions. He was an existence that could be counted on one hand. As the Realm Sea's Lord, he wouldn't allow his Realm Sea to be slaughtered like this. The flames of war raged ahead. There were dilapidated walls everywhere. Smoke and fire filled the air. Countless warships had been destroyed. The Heaven region's palaces all moved out to attack the Realm Sea. The Realm Sea's Lord and the Sea Divine Dragon turned into a streak of rainbow light. Their biting cold aura caused the Realm Sea to churn. Heaven region's audacity. Realm Sea Lord angrily rebuked. even though he knew the battle was unavoidable after the sea godly dragon made its move. However, the six-winged god king was despicable. He had his people find out that the sea god dragon and a master of the realm sea hadn't been in the realm sea for quite some time. That was why he launched such a fierce attack. If it wasn't for the realm sea lord and the others returning early, perhaps the realm sea's powers would no longer exist. It was the Temple of Light that attacked the boundless sea. There were mountains of corpses and seas of blood. The divine priest of light was currently fighting with venerable Wuya in the sky. The difference in strength between the two was huge. One was ranked 12th on the heavenly god list, while the other was ranked 30th. Supreme expert Wuya was only bitterly holding on. His body was already in tatters, pierced through in many places. Blood dyed his clothes red. When Lin Yu saw this scene, his eyes turned slightly cold. When he first came to the Realm Sea, he was under the care of Empyrean Boundless. Now that he saw this scene, how could he just sit by and do nothing? He took a step forward and used Not Heaven. His extreme speed seemed to have transcended the constraints of time and space. Chi, he punched out, containing unparalleled strength. The seawater of the realm sea below seemed to be about to evaporate under Lin Yu's blazing fist light. The fist struck the divine priest of light's staff. There was a faint shattering sound. The divine priest of light staggered and almost fell from the sky. Then, an emperor's sword appeared in Lin Yu's hand. He suddenly waved it, and sword light spread out for 3,000 feet, illuminating the mountains and rivers. Traitor Lin Yu! The divine priest of light was somewhat surprised. He didn't expect that Lin Yu, who had disappeared for a long time, would reappear now. Moreover, his cultivation seemed to have increased explosively again. He hadn't even used his unparalleled offensive sword technique, yet he could almost strike the divine priest of light down from the sky. Your strength has reached the late stage of the Emperor realm. This kind of cultivation speed was simply too terrifying. He remembered that a few months ago, Lin Yu still had to use the method of mutual destruction to seriously injure him. He was also indebted to the six-winged God King for secretly breaking through to the late stage of the Emperor realm a dozen years ago. Lin Yu, on the other hand, had surpassed him in just a few months. Moreover, his aura was incomparably condensed and powerful. Impossible. Since ancient times, even the six-winged God King did not possess such talent and good fortune. Whose strength did you borrow? The divine priest of light was incredulous. The Lord of the Realm Sea and the others also arrived at this time. They were furious, especially the Lord of the Realm Sea. His eyes were about to spit fire. When he saw the corpses of the boundless sea disciples all over the ground and saw that their blood had gathered into a small river that slowly flowed into the sea, he was infuriated beyond measure. What a temple of light! The Lord of the Realm Sea attacked. He faced the divine priest of light head-on and condensed a great halberd in his hand. He clashed with the divine priest of light. Lin Yu supported venerated boundless back to the surface. The God King's medallion emitted the power of time and healed all of boundless injuries. Greetings, sea god ancestor. Boundless stood up and bowed towards the sea god dragon, the Archaeosaurus, and the dark divine priest. At the same time, he looked at Lin Yu with a bitter expression and sighed. Before you came here, you were just an ignorant kid. I didn't expect you to become a powerhouse in such a short time. What's the situation now? Did the six-winged God King come personally? The sea god dragon walked out and asked. The six-winged God King is guarding the rear and hasn't taken action yet. He seems to have other plans. Boundless bowed and reported. Why is that? If the six-winged God King takes action, I'm afraid the seven seas will be plunged into misery and suffering in an instant. The sea god dragon frowned. Lin Yu seemed to have guessed what the six-winged God King was doing. He was using the massacre of the realm sea to cultivate and strengthen the abominable origin. Let's split up and send the forces of the realm sea to the primordial continent first, Lin Yu said slowly. They all had the teleportation runes carved by the Vairocana Buddha. As long as everyone was out of danger, They could take action and retreat to the Heaven Alliance. They all nodded. The six-winged God King was glaring at them from the rear. They could only avoid the battle for now. Boundless looked at his foundation that had been destroyed for so many years. He couldn't help but feel hatred in his heart. However, he couldn't do anything about it. For the sake of the Realm Sea's forces, he could only give up on this place. Without a doubt, the sudden outbreak of war had greatly damaged the Realm Sea's forces. At least half of the disciples had died under the sudden attack. Master of the Realm Sea, don't fight. After Lin Yu reminded him, he quickly stepped into the teleportation formation and headed towards the purple cloud sea. These little bastards from the heaven domain, I can drown them all with a spit of saliva. Although the Archaeosaurus and the sea god dragon often quarreled and even fought each other. However, facing the crisis of the realm sea ruled by the sea god dragon, they didn't hold back. They each headed towards the sea. Without waiting for any rest, Lin Yu stepped into the teleportation formation and appeared in the purple cloud sea. Who dares disturb the peace of the realm sea? Lin Yu's voice was like thunder, powerful and resonating. Everyone in the battle was shocked. They all looked towards the sky at Lin Yu, who walked out of the teleportation formation. The piercingly cold and powerful aura caused everyone to involuntarily feel fear. Chapter 11:10. The news was wrong. Didn't they say that Lin Yu was only initial Emperor Realm? The Wind God, the leader of the Divine Wind Temple, was shocked. Judging from Lin Yu's aura, he was far stronger than him. He's probably in the top 10 of the Celestial God ranking. Wind God's hair stood on end as he suppressed Venerable Zixia. He could see endless killing intent in Lin Yu's cold expression. Wind God immediately had the thought of retreating. Venerable Zixia's eyes shone. Their reinforcements had arrived. Before Wind God could react, Lin Yu took a step forward and appeared in front of him in the blink of an eye. The fifth seal was right in front of Wind God's face, its vast power wreaking havoc in the world. Wind God's expression changed drastically. He hurriedly made hand seals, summoning astral winds that turned into thousands of sharp blades that swept toward Lin Yu. Dark wind, Wind God called out softly. When the astral wind blades were 30 meters away from Lin Yu, they suddenly turned black. With a soul-stirring aura, they locked down the entire space. The sky above the realm sea seemed to have turned into the underworld, swallowing all light. Wind God's eyes glinted with mockery. Do you think you can be so fearless just because you've broken through to late Emperor Realm? You'll pay the price for your arrogance today. Wind God roared with laughter. His dark wind was a combination of the true power of the underworld. It would be difficult for an Emperor Realm cultivator to recover in a short time. He thought to himself that Lin Yu's age was still too young after all. His rapid progress in cultivation had also caused him to become conceited. He would pay a heavy price for this. All of this happened in an instant. Venerable Zixia covered her mouth. She knew full well how powerful the dark wind was. Even now, the remnant dark wind in her body was still corroding her body. If she didn't go into seclusion to resolve it, her consciousness might enter nirvana. It was impossible for Lin Yu to hide now. Lin Yu's body was completely enveloped by the dark wind. His figure became blurry, and it was difficult for the outside world to detect him. However, one could vaguely see that Lin Yu's fist did not slow down. Instead, it kept pushing forward. Wind God sneered. Rumble. The huge commotion caused the seawater to surge. Many people were swept into the sea. With Lin Yu as the center, circles of waves formed on the surface of the sea, reaching hundreds of feet. It was as if a towering mountain range was collapsing, spreading out in all directions. Hiss! When the disciples of the Zixia Sea region and the Heaven region saw this, they could not help but gasp. This was especially true for the disciples of the Divine Wind Hall in the Sky region. They knew very well how powerful their Hall Master's dark wind was. Even peak Emperor Realm cultivators would have to think twice before facing it. But before his eyes, Lin Yu merely relied on his fleshly body to blast the nether wind apart. Wind God's sneer stopped abruptly. When he saw Lin Yu's fist, it was already right in front of him. He was just about to resist, but in the next moment, his chest was penetrated. You're the one who's conceited. Wind God's pupils suddenly constricted, looking at the fist that pierced through his chest, his face full of disbelief. He trusted Dark Wind too much, so much so that when he saw Lin Yu wanted to break through with his body, he already let down his guard. And under not heaven's execution, how fast was Lin Yu's speed? What everyone saw was merely the afterimage left behind by Lin Yu. Lin Yu did not give Wind God the slightest chance to react. Azura's phantom descended, clasped his hands together, and directly smashed him into dust, body and soul destroyed. The remaining Wind God troops were all scared out of their wits at this time, losing the will to fight. They only wanted to escape as soon as possible, afraid that Lin Yu would see them. Killing God, an absolute killing God. Lin Yu's attack was too decisive, not giving people the slightest chance to react at all. And right at this moment, Wind God's corpse that had already turned into dust turned into a hazy light, heading out of Realm C. The aura of the source of extreme evil. Lin Yu looked at this scene and did not stop it. What he had to do now was to quickly transfer the people in Realm C to the primitive continent. An hour, finish off the remnants of Wind God Temple, and bring everyone from Xixia C to Chaos Demon C. After Lin Yu finished everything, he did not stop, but directly stepped into the teleportation array, heading in the direction of Netherworld C. No problem. Reverend Xixia clutched his chest, his face very pale. Now, he supported himself with a long sword and said with difficulty. Lin Yu pointed out a finger. The God King's order, which was also the system's space-time power, was released, instantly healing Reverend Xixia's injuries. Following that, Lin Yu's figure disappeared from the teleportation array. Reverend Xixia sighed. For Yi to be able to form a relationship with Lin Yu, it's really a great blessing. She remembered that when Lin Yu represented Boundless Sea in the sequence battle, no one was optimistic about him. Among them, it naturally included Reverend Xixia. Now, it seemed that she was blind. Now, Lin Yu's achievements were something that even she could only look at and not reach. I'm afraid that only the Realm C's Lord can stand shoulder to shoulder with him now. Reverend Xixia sighed, but at the same time, she was gratified that he had accepted Qin Yi as his disciple, which meant that Xixia C now had a close relationship with Lin Yu. That was enough. Now, Realm C had completely declared war with Heaven Domain. Xixia C suffered heavy casualties. If it wasn't for Lin Yu's help, it was very likely that Xixia C would be removed from the world in less than a few hours. Heaven Domain's strength was hidden too deeply. Moreover, they suddenly launched a war, catching Realm C off guard and almost suffering a calamity. Chaos Demon C. The situation here wasn't optimistic. Reverend Chaos Demon's strength was only at the bottom of the Heavenly God list, and the one he encountered was the Lightning Divine Palace's Lord, although the two of them were only 2 ranks apart on the Heavenly God list. But it was very obvious that Lightning God's strength had inexplicably increased by a lot. Now, Reverend Chaos Demon's black hair was disheveled, and he was constantly coughing out blood. At the same time, Reverend Chaos Demon was furious. He could only watch as the Chaos Demon C's disciples below were slaughtered by Lightning Divine Palace. The situation on the battlefield had already become one-sided, and Reverend Chaos Demon seemed so powerless. The corner of his mouth revealed a miserable cry, and his entire body erupted with a heart-palpitating power. Reverend Chaos Demon actually wanted to destroy his own source to unleash the strongest attack of his life and perish together with Lightning God. Lunatic, Lightning God's expression changed greatly as he retreated. The corner of Reverend Chaos Demon's mouth revealed a trace of arrogance. He activated his source, and his speed increased explosively as he chased after Lightning God. Lightning God, you old bastard, are you afraid of me? Reverend Chaos Demon laughed heartily. The Chaos Demon C's disciples below also noticed the sky at this time, and they were all in grief. Reverend, don't. If we die, we die. You must live. In the future, follow old ancestor sea god and kill your way to the heaven region. Yes, it won't be too late to avenge us at that time. The chaos demon sea's disciples cried out in grief. Beside them were the corpses of their fellow disciples, and they had long given up hope. They were unwilling to accept this and wanted to stop Reverend Chaos Demon's idea of perishing together with Lightning God. However, Reverend Chaos Demon seemed to have already decided to die. Old ancestor Sea God, the master of the world sea, when you return, you will naturally avenge this old man and the Chaos Demon Sea's disciples. It's just death. What's there to fear? Reverend Chaos Demon's laughter reverberated on the surface of the sea. Lightning God's face revealed disdain. The lightning in the sky gathered in his hand, transforming into a huge cage, and trapped the heavily injured Reverend Chaos Demon within. At the same time, black runes spread above the lightning. Reverend Chaos Demon discovered that no matter how much strength he used, he couldn't break free. Even his life essence was being continuously absorbed, and he fell into a weakened state. Die, Lightning God said indifferently. Following that, the lightning gathered into a heavenly sword and slashed towards Reverend Chaos Demon. Your heaven region, prepare to receive the fury of old ancestor sea god. Everyone closed their eyes, not wanting to see Reverend Chaos Demon fall. Can I? Lin Yu appeared. The lightning sword in the sky, along with the cage, was directly shattered by Lin Yu. He rescued Reverend Chaos Demon and carefully placed him on the island. Lin Yu, you're back. Chapter 11:11. The god of thunder and the others were shocked. The person in front of them had been seriously injured by the six-winged divine king. Even if he hadn't died, he shouldn't have appeared here safely. Moreover, his aura was unfathomable. There was no doubt that he was now above them. Lin Yu put down Supremacy Chaos Demon and slowly got up. His deep eyes were filled with intense, killing intent, cold and powerful. The aura he involuntarily emitted was like a divine mountain lying across the god of thunder's heart. Even his breathing felt somewhat stifled. Not only are you not dead, but you've also broken through? The god of thunder's expression changed, somewhat in disbelief. He had received the abominable origin of the six-winged divine king, so he naturally knew how terrifying this power was. Logically speaking, no one in the world could remain unscathed after being injured by this power. You could die now, Lin Yu said coolly. Before the god of thunder could react, the light of the imperial sword cut through the pervading lightning and turned it into nothingness. Arrogant, the god of thunder was in existence on the celestial god list. Now that he had the support of the abominable origin, he was confident that he could fight even the master of the realm sea. But now, he was being looked down upon by someone who had only cultivated for such a short time and threatened to kill him. Even if he was the reincarnation of the young divine king, this was still a kind of humiliation to the god of thunder. Power erupted from his entire body. Lightning spurted out from every pore of his body. At this moment, he was like the master of all lightning in the world. The lightning was mixed with traces of black matter that magnified the power of lightning infinitely. At the same time, it became incomparably domineering and repelled all other powers. So that bastard god of thunder didn't use his full strength when fighting me. Supremacy Chaos Demon's lips curled in bitterness. They were both at the bottom of the celestial god list. And now, there was such a huge gap between them. At the same time, he was sweating profusely for Lin Yu. In the current battle, he was fully aware of the god of thunder's strength. His offensive methods were simply unstoppable. The power of lightning was one of the strongest powers in the world. Now, it was supported by the abominable origin. Ordinary methods were indeed difficult to deal with. However, this wasn't too much trouble for Lin Yu, who had broken through to late-stage Emperor realm. Rumble, Azura's illusory figure, was over 1,000 jong tall. Like a deity, he slowly pressed his hand down. All of the black lightning was completely annihilated by this palm strike. Like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood, there was no room for resistance. Thunder God couldn't believe what he was seeing. Roaring, the lightning in his hand transformed into a long spear that he shot toward Linyu. An ant trying to shake a tree. You're overestimating yourself. Linyu only said a few words lightly, following which he swung the Emperor's sword in his hand. Now that he had defeated someone like a thunder god, he no longer needed to use heaven and earth together. The scene was almost one-sided. No matter how much the thunder god resisted in the sky, he could only succumb to the Emperor's sword as the lightning spear in his hand shattered. Linyu cut him down from the sky. Then, the abominable origin dissipated into the horizon along with its origin. Linyu wasn't surprised by this. The six-winged divine king had bestowed them with a life-saving method. Although he had saved the thunder god and wind god, he must have greatly damaged their vitality. Even their physical bodies and consciousness had been destroyed, and their origin had been damaged. It would be very difficult for them to recover in this period of time. Hiss! Gasps could be heard in the ocean of anarchy. Those who had a grudge with Linyu in the past, and their commander was killed later, the few who survived were even more stunned at this moment. Had their brains been flooded with water back then? They dared to clash with such a person. At the same time, they were endlessly grateful. If not for Linyu's powerful intervention today, the ocean of anarchy would have been destroyed. This place would have been reduced to a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. With a wave of his hand, Azura's illusory figure once again extended his palm. The disciples of the Lightning Divine Hall did not have the slightest ability to resist, as they were all killed by Linyu. The Ocean of Anarchy's disciples were all kneeling on the ground and bowing, grateful to Linyu for saving them. Linyu came in front of Honorable Chaos Demon and healed his injuries with the power of the Divine King's order. Thank you, little Divine King. In the future, if you want me, Chaos Demon, to go through water and tread on fire, I will not refuse. Linyu's identity was no longer a secret among the honorables in the Realm Sea. At this moment, Honorable Chaos Demon's aura recovered, and he stood up to express his gratitude. This was equivalent to saving his life. Linyu shook his head, indicating that there was no need to be overly formal. And at this moment, Honorable Zixia led the remaining troops in the Zixia Sea and crossed the teleportation formation. Honorable Zixia, have you settled the battle in the Zixia Sea? Honorable Chaos Demon was a little surprised. However, when he looked at Honorable Zixia and Linyu, he understood the whole story. Honorable Chaos Demon, gather the remaining troops in the Ocean of Anarchy. We will leave the Realm Sea now and retreat to the primitive continent. Linyu said to Honorable Chaos Demon. Although Honorable Chaos Demon was unwilling, he did not hesitate. Right now, there was no better way out than this. The six-winged Divine King was eyeing covetously outside the Realm Sea. If he participated in this battle, there would be no suspense. A peak sage realm expert who had touched the Saint King realm was no longer someone that the Sea Divine Dragon and the others could match. Now, only the primitive continent's Vairocana Buddha could keep the six-winged Divine King in check and make him wary. For a period of time, he would not dare to invade the primitive continent, and their Realm Sea forces could also recuperate in the primitive continent and wait for the opportunity to attack when they were strong. The disciples of the Zixia Sea and the Ocean of Anarchy Sea all had heavy expressions. This battle was too tragic. Just the people around them were mostly dead or injured. This made them sad and angry at the same time. Someone cut his palm and let the blood drip into the Realm Sea. If I don't take revenge, I am not human. Realm Sea's calamity this time. In the future, we will make the Sky Domain pay back 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. Some people couldn't help but tear up. They were about to leave their homeland where they had lived their whole lives. They didn't know if it would still be like this when they returned. We will return. Linyu stood at the front and said indifferently. His tone was unquestionable. He had also fought for the Realm Sea in the Sequence battle. As the remaining members of the Ocean of Anarchy Sea gathered, Lin Yu stretched out his palm, and the Virokana seal in his palm rapidly spread. In just an instant, it formed a realm gate. This was the method that the Virokana Buddha gave to Lin Yu and the others. It allowed them to bring away the disciples of the other sea regions before the six-winged Divine King attacked. Everyone didn't stay and stepped into the realm gate, disappearing from the realm sea. Seeing that everyone had left, Lin Yu, who was about to step into the realm gate, sensed the aura behind him and slowly turned his head. He saw the white-haired Lin Xiao holding Ninth Nether Sage's head and standing quietly in the distance. His eyes were cold and didn't have any emotions. "Is this your choice?" Lin Yu looked at Lin Xiao coldly. "I'm not your shadow," Lin Xiao said coldly, but he didn't have any intention of attacking and just looked at Lin Yu indifferently. Lin Yu didn't hesitate either. As he stepped into the realm gate, the vast spatial aura was restrained. Lin Yu had already agreed with Archaeosaurus and the others that after saving the various sea region forces, they would gather at the Heaven Alliance of the primitive continent. Lin Yu had successfully resolved the hidden danger. Presumably, as long as there were no hidden sage realm powerhouses obstructing them, Archaeosaurus and the others wouldn't fall behind and might even be faster. At this moment in the sky of the Heaven Alliance, there was a strong spatial fluctuation. This made Lin Yu's old acquaintances guarding the Heaven Alliance all have solemn expressions. Many people who were in seclusion appeared in advance. A huge gate was formed, and a large group of people walked out of it. The aura exuding from their bodies was very powerful, especially Chaos Demon Supremacy and Zixia Supremacy, who made them feel very depressed. The crowd that walked out was surrounded by blood aura. They didn't speak and were in low spirits. It made the entire Heaven Alliance's city feel very heavy. In this battle, the Realm Sea suffered heavy losses, and it would be difficult to recover even after a long time. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.